مع الدكتور عبد الرحمن محمد العاصمي مدير العام لمكتب التربية العربي الخليج. الزملاء نرحب بكم في هذا الصباح الرائع، وان شاء الله يستمر روعته الى ما بعد مباراة نرجع عن السعودية والارجنتين، ونفرح جميعا بهذا اليوم ليكون يوم بهيج من اوله حتى اخره. اجمالا نرحب بكم في ورشة العمل الخاصة بتجسير البيانات والمستمدة من التقييمات الدولية وماسحة الوفاق فيزا والبيرز والتيمز وغيرها من التقييمات الدولية توفرها لتغيير وتطوير وأيضا السياسات التربوية والتعليمية، والذي يقيمه مكتب التربية العربي دول الخليج بالتعاون مع منظمة التعاون التنمية والتعاون الاقتصادي الوطنية. في الواقع حرصنا دائما في المكتب على بناء على توجيهات مع المدير العام ان يتم الاعداد لهذه الورشه اعداد جيد بحيث نستفيد من الخبرات الدوليه ومن التجارب الدوليه، وتم التعاون مع الOECD لاستقطاب تجارب من المملكه المتحده واستونيا من النرويج وفرنسا وغيرها من دول الOECD، وايضا عرض التجارب في الدول الاعضاء حتى نخلص ايضا بدراسه مستوفيه كيف يمكن الاستفاده من البيانات التي توفرها الدراسات الدوليه لتطوير السياسات والتربيه التعليميه في الدول الاعضاء. اجمالا الموضوع صباحكم بهيج ورائع وسعداء جدا بوجودكم، ومعالي المدير العام اترك الفرصه لمعالي لافتتاح اشغال هذه الورشه. معالي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام. أسعد الله صباحكم جميعا بخير، وأقول الحقيقة لكل الزملاء الذين ترافقوا الخليج مرحبا بكم سلامتكم التعاون الاقتصادي التنمية. سعيد جدا اليوم مكتب التربية العربي يقيم هذه الفعالية التي يعني هي أحد البرامج التي تأتي في اعتبار للتعاون المشترك بين التربية العربية. أيضا تأتي هذه الورشة في إطار على كثير من التفاصيل المتعلقة بالدولية والتعليمية، ولهذا سعى المكتب إلى لمحاولة إطلاع الزملاء المختصين في القطاعات الأولى والثالثة في الدول الأعضاء على كيفية الحقيقة أيضا توظيف استثمار هذه النتائج، توظيف استثمار هذه البيانات في توجيه السياسات، وكذلك مساعدة أبناء القرار أي برامج تطويرية ذات علاقة بموضوع هذه الاستثمار. بكل تأكيد هذه الورشة تضم سلسلة أيضا من اللقاءات والبرامج التي سوف تكون بالشراكة مع التي، في ظن هذه الورشة لها من الأهمية كثيرة نظرا لأهمية مثل هذه الدراسات. أتمنى إن شاء الله أن تكون هذه الورشة حافلة نقاش خروج بتوصيات ربما ان شاء الله يصل في تقرير عن هذه الورشه الوطنيه العربيه والتقييمات يوزع على الاعضاء على تقييم المنظمه تخلق بابرز التقييمات الوطنيه اليه هذه ختاما الحقيقه اشيد بقوه الحقيقه بالتعاون الكبير الذي بين وبين المكتب العربي. أنا سعيد جدا بمشاركة الزملاء الطلاب المنظمة، ونحن على يقين إن شاء الله بأنه هذه الورشة تقديم للنتائج المأمولة والتي يصبح لها الزملاء في ميدان التعليم نحو تطوير وتجويد التعليم في الدول العربية. أيضا الزملاء من وزارات التربية والتعليم والهيئات المسؤولة، أيضا شكر خاص لأخي معالي الدكتور عبد السلام يدير هذه الورشة وتعاون شكورا ومقدرا من كل الزملاء في المكتب العربي، إن شاء الله يأخذ بكلمات شكرا معاليك، شكرا لتوجيهاتك السديدة والعمل المشترك وأيضا تطوير العمل مع منظمات الدولية. الآن أتيح الفرصة للتعاون الاقتصادي والوطنية السيد الصديق ماركو، وهو مدير المسؤول على السياسات وتحليل البيانات في منظمة الوطنية، ويعني سوف يتكلم يبحث عن الوطنية ويعطي أيضا نبذة عن المشاركة.
Okay, thank you. I'll speak slowly, also for the translators, because that's often a very difficult task to recognize. You won't speak too fast to help them out. So thank you all for being here for this 3-day workshop. We got a full agenda for the next 3 days. As said, on behalf of the team, I'm very pleased to be here. So thank you to ABEX for organizing this. Particularly to Dr. Azmi, Dr. Dulu, and Salam. We would like to briefly take you through the workshop. And we got this slide here. Basically, the aim of the workshop has already been told, but we have divided the workshop in 3 days. The first day, trying to set like the general context in terms of the presentation, in terms of the recent development in international student assessments, obviously in the ABEX countries, but also the OECD countries. For the second and the third day, we're going to be looking more closely at specific themes, specific policy areas. The area of student outcomes, issue of school policy, but also student well-being. The latter is also a topic that has come up increasingly more in OECD countries because of the correlation between student results in the cognitive academic field, and also social emotional fields. This is basically what we have for 2 days in store. We will be structuring the workshop in plenary sessions. We'll all be having some presentations and some discussions on groups. And having more practical sessions, we'll be working with Tariq and Lucia. We'll be digging in much deeper in terms of the data and what we can draw from it in terms of the context. Next slide. This is kind of the learning objectives. I used to be a teacher many years ago, so I always learned that at the end, or at the start of a workshop, you should present the objectives of what we're trying to achieve. And I think this is the goals we would like to set out with yourselves. Ideally, and this is very much from us, the peer learning which is beneath there. It's learning between countries, between yourselves and OECD, countries also from yourselves. I think that's very important to highlight. Our role is very much trying to also look at the good practices, what we can learn and draw to other OECD countries. That's definitely what the team has been looking towards. So it's kind of an objective, not specifically stated here, but it's underneath all that we do at the OECD to promote that peer learning between countries. So not just the OECD countries, but much broader. As you might know, we're working more and more across countries around the world. I'm very happy to be continue to have the collaboration with the ABEX country. So these are the 3 objectives. I want to continue stating them. I think we got a full agenda. For a few days. I think that indeed this afternoon we have to watch the Saudi Arabia-Argentina match, which I'm very much looking forward to. I think it's going to be a challenging match. Fingers crossed. But that has impact a little bit on the agenda. So we try to modify it and work around it to accommodate, of course, because it is very much important and appreciated. So thank you again to ABEX and to Dr. Azmi, Dr. Abdul Salam, and looking forward to working with you in the next years. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا. فقط اعلان اولي بناء على توجيهات معالي وزير العام وعفوا التوجيهات الساميه. تم تعديل الجدول موزع معكم من الساعه 1 إلى الساعه 3 سوف نعملها استراحه. الراغبين بمشاهده المباراه سيكون هناك موجود متاح في اكثر من مكان موجود هنا في الفندق، وسوف نكتب للزميلات والزملاء. بعدها سنعود مرة أخرى إلى هنا نستكمل برنامجنا. بالتالي سوف يكون هناك إزاحة تقريبا حوالي ساعتين. أرجو تحملنا هذا لأنه يعني وصلنا لهنا وبغرض الاستفادة، وفي نفس الوقت هناك يعني رغبة من الجميع مشاركة المباراة، وبالتالي سوف نتحدى هذا. وأكون أيضا في نفس الوقت هي فرصة الغداء، سوف الغداء متاح وأيضا المشاركة المباراة متاحة. ننتقل الآن إلى الجلسة الأولى سوف يديرها السيد ماركو. هي تكون عن بعد أيضا لعرض تجارب دولية. ونؤكد مرة أخرى أنه سيكون كل يوم هناك ملخص لليوم الأول، ثم أيضا في النهاية سوف يكون هناك ملخص عام، ثم بعدها سوف يكون هناك تقرير تحليلي على نتائج الورشة. الأساس النظري، التجارب الدولية، تجارب الأعضاء، التوصيات والمثليات. وبما كما وجه معالي سوف يصدر هذا في كتاب باللغتين العربية والإنجليزية ويوزع على جميع الأعضاء، ده أيضا بحيث نعمق الاستفادة من نتائج وموجات الورشات. شكرا جزيلا. شكرا معالي. شكرا جزيلا وبالتوفيق، وسوف نوافق أول بأول على نتائج الورشات. شكرا معالي. يسمع.
Okay, so we're straight going to the next topic then. So the first session is about the major developments in international student assessments, an overview of the states and OECD countries. We have two presenters. First is our colleague from the OECD, Miyako, we're going to be trying to bring in online in a second. And then we have Dr. who is presenting the following. And then we'll have some opportunities for discussions. We can ask questions to Miyako, she will also the colleagues in the room, so, and Dr. Lues, of course. Ready? So it is early for our colleagues in Paris. We think the clock is early, so we're a little bit spoiled. But I think we have her online, ready to start the presentation.
So, good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to present PISA. I'm a lead analyst in the PISA team. I've been working for the PISA project since 2004. So today I would like to share with you the three aspects of PISA. First, I will introduce very briefly what is PISA about. And then second, some PISA results highlighting how the international student assessment results can inform policy and practice. And then the last part is about some innovation or evolution of PISA over time. So PISA is a program for international student assessment. Its objective is to assess the extent to which future generations have acquired key knowledge and skills that are essential for full participation in societies. So when we talk about future generation, PISA decided to focus on 15-year-old students in school. This is because in most of the countries, the compulsory education ends around 15 years old. And then when we talk about the key knowledge and skills, we don't really focus only on the replication skills, but we want to measure how students can apply what they have learned in and out of school in the unknown context, unfamiliar context. How much can they apply the knowledge and skills in a real life context? So this is the essence of PISA. So PISA provides reliable indicators on education outcomes. And those education outcome indicators are internationally comparable. And also, PISA is implemented every 3 years. So we can follow the trend of education outcomes. But PISA is not only about education outcomes and ranking. PISA is more than just ranking. So what is most important here is the contextual questionnaire information. So we ask students and school principals to provide information about students themselves or schools. And we can correlate those questionnaire information, contextual information, with education outcomes. So now I would like to talk about what PISA measures. So when PISA started, launched in 1997, the group called DESECO, Definition and Selection of Competency Project, was convened. So this group had many different fields of expertise: anthropology, education, statistics, and psychology, economics. Those people in this field get together and then discuss what are the key competencies needed for the future. And then they identify 3 big groups of competencies. The first group is the top left blue circle, which is the use tools interactively. So in this context, tools are the language or numbers. And then the left gray circle is the interact in heterogeneous groups. So this is more like social skills, social emotional skills. And then bottom circle is the act autonomously. So these 3 big groups of competencies I identified are important skills in future participation of society. But PISA has to start with a very small part of these 3 big competencies, and then PISA decided mainly focus on use tools interactively and focuses on language and numbers and science. And then plan was eventually we grow and we expand more so that we can cover other circles like the interactive heterogeneous groups or act autonomously. So PISA started with the 3 core domains: reading, mathematics, and science. And then we add 1 innovative domain in each assessment so that we can measure something beyond reading, math, and science. So here is the recent PISA cycles. So I just show from the 2015, even though PISA started from in 2000. So 2015, science was the major domain. Even though we measure reading and math, but there are more science items included. And then as an innovative domain, collaborative problem solving was measured. And PISA 2018, we alternate the major domain. So the reading was the major domain, and the global competence was the innovative domain. And currently, the PISA 22 is ongoing, and mathematics is the major domain, and creative thinking is the innovative domain. So normally, PISA is conducted every 3 years, but between 2018 and 2022, there are 4 years gap. This is just because of the pandemic. When we are about to implement the field trial in 2020, pandemic hit the world, so we decided in 2018, 79 countries from 600,000 students participated. And here is the list of countries and economies participating in PISA 2018. And currently for PISA 2022, over 80 countries and economies are participating. And the result of PISA 22 will be released in December year 2023. Here are some PISA results. So PISA made it possible to put all countries' results on the same scale. So here is a PISA 2018 result of the country average in reading performance. And then we can rank the country from top to bottom. And those countries on the blue line is the above the OECD average score. And those countries around the yellow is the about around the same score as OECD average, and those countries on the red bar is the country below the OECD average. And we can track the trends. Here are the two examples from Germany and United Kingdom. So we can track the performance from 2000 for reading and 2003 for mathematics and 2006 for science. And comparing Germany and United Kingdom, just looking at the 2006 and 2018 result of reading, there is no really performance difference. However, the shape of the trend are slightly different. While in the United Kingdom, the trend is kind of linear, but Germany is a more curved linear relationship. And the same for the mathematics. There's no really performance difference in mathematics in 2006 and 2018 for both countries, but the shape are different. And the same thing for the science. So we can look into the trend and the shape of the trend in detail over time. And PISA can also put a lot of emphasis on equity. So one important dimension of equity is inclusion. How much proportion of students can attain level 2 or above is an important benchmark for us. And also this level 2 proficiency level in reading and mathematics are used to monitor sustainable development goal or 4. So this is not only the PISA indicator, but it's used widely around the world. And here is the result of the reading level 2 or above or below level 2. So the length of the bar below the red horizontal line is a proportion of students who didn't reach the baseline in reading. You can see that quite many countries, more than half of the students didn't reach this baseline. We also look at other aspects of equity, which is the relationship between the student background and performance. This is the graph about the relationship between students' socioeconomic background and performance. Red mark is the bottom quarter of socioeconomic background, so disadvantaged students. And then blue triangle is the advantage student, which is the top quarter, top 25% of students on the indicator of socioeconomic background of the students. In any education system, there is a difference between the advantage and disadvantage student in terms of the performance score. But you can see the gap between the triangle and the red line is quite different. The magnitude of the gap is quite different. So we can learn from other countries. What are those countries which maintain this gap small are doing? What kind of policy are implemented in the more equitable education system? So we can learn from other countries what they first we identify the system which minimize the impact of the social background to performance. For example, like Australia, Canada, Finland, and Japan, those countries are not so big gap between the advantage and disadvantage student. And then we will look into the policy and practice going in those countries. Here's another way of showing the equity and performance. So equity and performance indicator combined within this figure. Horizontal line is the equity. Towards right is more equity. And then vertical line is the performance score in reading. And we scatter plot the countries and the economies on this plot. And top right square is the system, education system, which perform above the OECD average mean performance, average performance, and they maintain the impact of the socioeconomic background student on performance minimum. So this graph shows that it's possible to attain both the high performance and equity at the same time. And we have done a lot of statistical analysis and look into those successful countries which attain high performance and the greater equity. What are they doing using the contextual questionnaire data? And we found out the 4 key points. One is these strong performers, strong system, they tend to provide quality pre-primary education for all students. So learning is not starting only from the primary school, but the learning starts as soon as babies are born. And then these countries, strong countries, they are providing a very quality pre-primary education for all students. And the second is setting a high expectation for all students. We found out that those systems have greater gap, so more inequity. They tend to sort the students into different track or different programs or different schools at the very early age, like 11 years old or 12 years old. On the other hand, strong system, they tend to sort the student later stage, 15 years old or 16 years old. So it's important to set the high expectation for all students, the belief that all students can perform, and then provide adequate support for the student to learn. And the third bullet point is the adequate resource. It's important to not provide adequate resources to the schools regardless of the school background. And then the last point we found is the autonomy. It's important to give school autonomy about what students learn while setting the centralized accountability arrangement so that no school fall behind. And PISA data is helpful to identify, combat with myth. So often people say that, oh, those high-performing systems, they spend a lot of money on education. That's why people tend to think that the money is the key. And the PISA data can verify that kind of belief or saying. And here is the graph showing the vertical line, again, the performance. And the horizontal line is the resources for spending financial resources invested in students. So to a certain point, it's important to invest in education. So there's a threshold that we really have to invest in education. So you see the very strong correlation between the spending education and performance up until a certain point. But after that, you see the flat line. This means that the absolute level of spending education is not necessarily the key for the high performance, but it's more important to how to allocate those resources across schools. So we can show with the data that what we generally believe, is it correct or not? And then we can start the discussion how to make the education system stronger. In the last 2 minutes, I would like to discuss about the PISA's evolution. So the major evolution is the introduction of the computer-based assessment in 2015. Up until 2012, PISA implemented the major part of the assessment with paper and pencil. And then up until 2012, we had the optional assessment with the computer-based assessment. But 2015 is the major year we changed to the computer-based assessment. And this is really important change because nowadays many kids are reading on screen rather than on paper. And then it's important to keep the PISA test authentic and real life experience. And then also with moving to the computer-based assessment, we can measure something that we were quite difficult to measure with the paper-based. This is one example of the new aspect that we started measuring in 2018, which is the student's skill to distinguish facts from opinions. When the digitalization was not there yet in 2000, a lot of the reading was linear. So the student read the book, and then from the top to from the page 1 to page 100 or so. But now, and all these books are authored and then created by the publisher or censored. But now all the information on the internet, and then some information maybe not true, and then the student have to be able to evaluate by themselves and distinguish the facts from opinion. So that's the getting more and more important skill set these days. So PISA measured that in 2018, and we found out that the school system which teach how to detect the facts from opinion, those students tend to perform well in this skill set. So this is a quite encouraging, promising result because the school can play an important role in this digitalized world for students to be able to correctly navigate in the digitalized world. I skip. And another part of the evolution is the innovative domain. And PISA 2022, we introduced the creative thinking as an innovative domain. So creative thinking is very challenging to measure. But we focused on the certain aspect of the creative thinking, and then we will publish the result in 2024. And just give a sense of what we are doing is this is the example question about creative thinking. Students see this picture, and then students are asked to write a story out of these 6 dice. And then it's evaluated how creative the story is. And in 2025, we are planning to implement learning in digital world. So this is exactly how students navigate in the digital world and then learn in the digital sphere and self-regulated learning. And then before the test start, we measure student skill set and then give some tasks for students to run during this test time. And then towards the end of the test time, students are evaluated again. So we can measure how much students can learn by themselves in the digital space. And just as a conclusion, so within PISA, it's possible to put the national standards in a broader perspective. And then PISA helps us to identify the group of students, a group of schools which are at risk. And then PISA is useful to challenge myth. And then PISA help policymakers and educators to look outwards and see what is possible education and what they are doing. And PISA doesn't give you an answer, but PISA help you to generate hypotheses. And thank you for listening.
So thank you, Miyako. Miyako will be listening in for the next presentation, and then we'll ask some questions to Miyako and Dr. Ruiz, who will be asked to present now.
I would like to presentation
ميكروفون دكتور.
التقييمات احنا لا شك اليوم نتحدث عن جنس والفيزا يمكن التركيز حيكون على الفيزا والسي الفيزا، لكن لا يمنع الإشارات في بعض الجوانب فقط الأنظمة التعليمية عادة في كل الأنظمة التعليمية يكون هناك مناقشات مكثفة في بحث أداء تطوير أداء الطلبة بما ينعكس على التنمية في تلك البلدان، وهذا هي في كل العالم. وبالتالي لا يمكن فقط الخليجية، لابد أن يكون مشاركاتنا وتحليل نتائج الطلاب في تلك الاختبارات ينتج منه يعني تطوير تنموي في بلدان. فهذه برامج التقييم الدولي توفر معلومات حول استعداد الطلاب ومشاركة القوى العامة. الاختلاف في الواقع بالإنجاز بين البلدان المختلفة قد يخلق يعني نوع من التحدي والضغط صاحب السياسات التعليمية بهدف حقيقة تحسين أداء طلابهم ليلحقوا بالوعي، وبالتالي هذا قد يكون ويفترض أن يكون لمراجعات جادة للأنظمة التعليمية. نحن في منطقتنا الخليجية غالب هذه الدراسات لم نصل للآخر سواء فيزا أو تيمز أو فيز كذلك. فبالتالي هذه بحد ذاتها لا تسمن ولا تغني، لكن يفترض أن يتبعها مراجعة المنظومة التعليمية. لماذا هذا الطلاب بهذا الشكل؟ قبل الحقيقة حتى أن ننظر لبعض الجوانب التفصيلية مثل الإكويتي والجندر والاختلافات هذه، أنا في ظني أنه طالما لم نصل للآخر يعني البحث في هذه الجوانب مبكر. فما يمنع الحقيقة الاستفادة من كل التجارب السابقة اللي يعني ساعد فيها البلدان وطورت أدائها، وبالتالي تحسن الأداء في تلك البلدان مع الأخذ بالاعتبار الاختلافات في السياقات الاجتماعية والثقافية. أهم العوامل الحقيقة بالذات في دراسة فيزا فاعل تحسين الطلاب تقوم على جودة المعلم، وهذه هي ممكن أقدرها لاحقا. جودة أداء المعلمين هذه عامل حاسم، كذلك تتبع الطلاب، تتبع أدائهم، تطورهم في الإنجاز المدرسي في المدرسة مبكرة. بالإضافة إلى هذا لا شك تخصيص الموارد للمدارس بما يطور من الأداء سواء على مستوى التنمية المهنية للمعلمين أو حتى على توفير البيئات الإنتاجية والعلوم. ناهيك عن وجود أنظمة تقويم فعالة، بمعنى انه يعني نربط الحقيقه تقويم التدريس والمشاركه الانجاز سواء يعني تقويم تتبعي تقويمي او كذلك تقويم نهائي. وكذلك لابد من يعني اعداد دراسات على يعني النتائج اللي نصل لها. أنا بقى بستعرض بعض الشيبس والدايجرامز والتيبلز. الحقيقة يعني معلومات تعرفونها بالتالي سأمر عليها سريعا، لكني أني سأصل منها استنتاجات معينة فممكن أشير لها يعني بشكل سريع. يعني هذا مثلا جدول يربط الدخل بالاداء يعني في دولنا المختلفه متوسط الدخل الفرد. هذه مشاركاتنا في التنس، يعني دولنا متى بدات المشاركه، يعني طبعا مختلف تاريخ بدايه المشاركه، لكن الآن تقريبا كل الدول الست الخليجية أصبحت مشاركة في التنس في السنوات الأخيرة. الفيزا تختلف في الدوليات، يمكن عندنا الآن 4 دول تشارك، عندنا البحرين والكويت والكويت في الحيرز وعمان كذلك، وقطر الآن مشاركة في فيزا والبيرز، وكذلك الإمارات وكذلك مكتب. هذه النتائج السنوات المختلفة كذلك. أنا سأصل إلى بعض الإشكال تقارن تطور الأداء. الحقيقة ما عندنا تطور حقيقي للأداء سواء في التنس أو في الفيزا، وهذا هو الحقيقة المقلق، يعني أن نكون نراوح مكاننا في فترة طويلة. طبعا هذا يختلف من دولة إلى دولة. بعض الدول البحرين صار عندهم مقارنة في الفترة الأخيرة في بعض الاختبارات صار عندهم شيء من التطور. ويفترض أن ندرس كذلك يعني الدول اللي صار عندها تحسن الأداء. فهذا مثلا تنزل في 19 يعني لو جينا نقارن كلام الدولية ما بين السنوات المختلفة نجد أن هناك صعود في بعض مثلا البحرين من 2011 إلى 2019 في الصعود. أحيانا بعض الدول تكون في نزول ثم صعود مثل المملكة العربية السعودية، لكن أنا الحقيقة في يعني عندما تكون السكور أقل من الآفريج فأشوف إنه حقيقة يعني نالوا معنى كثير. يعني عندما صار 10 درجات أو 20 درجة في المنزل 10 يعني بدون أن نصل إلى المتوسط الدولي فهذا مشكلة. هذه مقارنة وفقا للجندر، المهم عندنا الآن أنه يتحسن أولا المتوسط. الفروق بين الجنسين حتى عالميا يعني وين يوجد بعض الدراسات تشير لبعض الفروق بين الجنسين في بعض البلدان، لكن أنا في ظني ليست قضية أساس لدينا قبل أن نحسن يعني مثل ما قلت متوسط. هدف بالنسبة للساينس قبل الماس العملية بالنسبة للجندر. هذه الرياضيات الآن كذلك يعني تمرجح الدرجات أحيانا وصعود واضح في بعض البلدان، صعود أقل. لكن أنا الحقيقة يعني يريح كثير لما نقرر عند الآن نوصل إلى 81 فهذا هو ما نبحث عنه. هذه مقارنة. طيب هذه some explanation of how achievement result in international scale assessment. أنا الآن يعني الحقيقة في صحة العبارة قراءة شخصية و يعني بعض الاسامبشنز اللي أعتقد فيها قد يكون الحقيقة ضغط في أعداد المعلمين، لأنه أنا في كثير من الجوانب أشوف يعني هذه رؤية شخصية مبنية على خبرة ومبنية على استنتاج من بعض الدراسات. إنه الشورتج اللي عندنا الحقيقة هو ناتج من الأداء داخل الصف، سواء يعني في الجانب التدريسي أو في جانب التعلم نفسه، وكله الحقيقة يرجع كذلك لقيادة المعلم. بالتالي التطوير المهني للمعلمين أتصور أنه عامل حاسم في تحسين الأداء. أنا عندما أقول تحسين الأداء لا أقصد الدرجة في تلك الدرجات فقط، يفترض أن تكون الدرجات في تلك الدراسات الدولية انعكاس طبيعي لأداء طلابنا عندما يتحسن فعلا الإنجاز وتحسن قناعتنا في أداء طلابنا بشكل عام. فحتى الدراسات الحقيقة الدولية تشير إلى أنه الدراسات اللي سواء على التنس أو على الفيزا تربط الحقيقة أداء المعلم بأداء طلابه، وأن هناك ترابط طردي في الجانبين. إحنا يمكن حتى في الدراسات أنا يعني صدقا يمكن أركز على بيانات المملكة العربية السعودية، هذه العلاقات حتى ما هي واضحة عندنا، وأتصور أنه كذلك فرضية من عندي أنه طالما الدرجة أصلا متدنية فما يكون لأي تفسيرات معنى أخرى. هذا جانب. الجانب الآخر الحقيقة وهذا كذلك سأشير له لاحقا، ودي يعني نتحقق من مصداقية الاستجابة بالذات في الانسترومنت الأخرى الاستبانات وخلافها. يعني أحيانا العلاقات اللي تخرج على عينات طلابنا ما هي متسقة مع النتائج العالمية، وبالتالي كأنها تخالف المنطق، أو يعني المنطق الطبيعي أنه تحسن أداء المعلم بالضرورة يحسن أداء الطلاب. أعتقد كذلك أن مستوى الوعي بأهمية التقويم الدولي جانب مهم. يمكن هذا تحسن مع الوقت. أقصد يمكن في البدايات طلابنا ما ألفوا مثل هذه الاختبارات. كذلك يعني قد تكون مناهجنا تدريسنا قد ما كان يتوافق مع مثل تلك الاتجاهات. حاليا قد يكون الأمر قليل، وإن كان هناك الحقيقة حاجة ل البحث عن متطلبات مثل تلك الدراسات الدولية كتوجهات. يعني على سبيل المثال اليوم البرزنتيشن في الصباح أشار لي أنه في 2022 هناك تركيز على كذلك الكريتيف ثينكينج، هناك تركيز على الكونتكست، يعني انه ليس فقط حل مشكلات انما البحث في، لانه الثيم سيكون الماس، وهو يعني تم ورصدت هذه الجوانب لكن النتائج ما طلعت بعد. فاعتقد انه السياقات والاهتمام بالسياقات ويعني ليس الحل فقط، انما كيف يفكر الطالب، ما هي طرق الحل، هذه كذلك جزء من الرصد الأخير. فهناك رصد لبيئة التعلم نفسها وكيف الطلاب يعملون. فهذه من الجوانب التي ستربط بالنتائج كذلك. مهم جدا أن تكون هذه الأمور يعني دقيقة وواضحة كذلك في التطبيق. لعلكم أنتم في أثناء عروضكم تشيرون إلى كيف تم بالذات التطبيق الأخير للفيزا، ويعني الأدوات الجديدة اللي عنيت ب سواء حتى بالبيئة الرقمية داخل المدرسة، مثل ما قلت كذلك السياقات اللي تتم فيها الحلول. أحيانا كذلك بعض الدراسات أشارت الحقيقة أنه يعني مدة خبرة المعلم في التدريس قد تكون عامل مؤثر في نتائج طلابه. فالمعلمين الأفضل بشرط أن يكون خبرة نامية ليست خبرة متكررة فقط. وتوافق هذه النتيجة مع يعني مع كثير من الدراسات الحقيقية سواء في منطقتنا الخليجية أو كذلك الدول الأخرى. وهذا يطرح علينا يعني العديد من التحديات في جانب التطوير المهني للمعلمين. الوقت المخصص أحيانا سواء للرياضيات أو للعلوم أو للقراءة كذلك جانب قد يكون مؤثر في تحسن الطلاب. كذلك في البرزنتيشن قبلي أشارت إلى أنه البيئات الثقافية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية لا شك كذلك هذه عوامل مؤثرة. تعلم الطالبين، الوالدين، اهتمامهم، كل هذه العوامل يعني أمر طبيعي أن يكون لها دور في تحسن أداء الطلاب. أنا في الأخير حاب أختم ببعض التساؤلات من خلال القراءة قد ما أكون مهتم مثلكم بتتبع النتائج والمشاركة نفسها، لكن كراسد خارجي يعني حاب أطرح بعض الأسئلة للنقاش، سواء من خبراء الOECD أو منكم كمشاركين. لعلها يعني أولاً إنه هل تستطيع دولنا في how can our seven countries تستفيد من بعض في خلال مشاركاتها المختلفة بالفعل يعني نحسن من أدائنا. يعني إذا عندنا تجارب جيدة مثلا البحرين الآن صار عندهم تطور في الأداء، هذه بيئات متشابهة، فيفترض أنه لعل اجتماعنا هذا يخدم في هذا السياق. كذلك how can we read differences في النتائج سواء نحن أو الحقيقة البلدان الأخرى، هذا مهم. العوامل المؤثرة والحقيقة اللي ممكن تلعب دور في سواء في يعني نريد ان نستفيد من نتائجنا في التاثير سواء على صناع السياسه التعليميه او صناع القرار في بلداننا بما يطور الحقيقه يعني تعليم الرياضيات والعلوم وبالتالي تطوير الانجاز. فكل هذا الحقيقة يعني عندما نقول يعني لابد أن تكون هذه النتائج توظف بالضغط على صانع السياسة التعليمية لتحسين الحقيقة تعليم الرياضيات والعلوم والقراءة بما يحسن الأداء. أنا في الأخير يعني قد يعني أطمح لي إنه يكون عندنا established national monitoring and evaluation system. هي مهم جدا إنه يكون حتى يعني ممكن لا شك إن كثير من بلداننا الآن لديهم بعض العمل على التقييمات الوطنية. مهم التوسع في هذا الجانب، مهم الحقيقة أن يكون رافد لمشاركاتنا، وكذلك ممكن يكون عندنا اختبار إقليمي يناسب بيئتنا قبل الحقيقة الصعود للمنافسات والدراسات الدولية. أنا الحقيقة إن سمحتوا لي بس أختم ببعض المقترحات اللي أعتقد من خلال هي مراجعة عدد من الدراسات ممكن تكون مؤثرة في سواء يعني تحسين الأداء وبالتالي المبني الحقيقة على يعني تحسين السياسات التعليمية في هذا الجانب. الدراسات تشير إلى أن كل شيء يبدأ من المنهج. يعني لابد الحقيقة أن نراجع منهجنا نتأكد من أنه المناهج مبنية على معايير، مبنية على أهداف واضحة، سواء هذه المعايير منشأة إنشاء أو مستجلبة. إذا كانت مستجلبة لابد نتأكد كذلك من تماسك هذه المعايير، اتساقها، وكذلك يعني أن تكون ذات أهداف واضحة وممكنة للتحقيق. لابد الحقيقة من بحث الجودة، لابد يعني الابتكار التحسين في أساليب التعلم والتعليم، توظيف التقنية بشكل جيد، مثل ما قلت كذلك الاهتمام بالتقويم والممارسات التقويمية الصحيحة. المعلمين هم الحقيقة الكي لكل هذه الجهود. أنا في الأخير يعني أتمنى الحقيقة إن شاء الله الورشة يعني تسهم في حلول وأفكار مشتركة في هذا الاتجاه. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you, everybody, particularly also to Dr. Ways. Are there any questions? We lost Bianco with the connection, I call it Bianco. But any questions for Dr. Ways or general comments in relation to the presentation that we just had?
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to ask you as an OECD member that we know from the CEO of ACER that OECD is conducting a big research for 3 years, and you asked ACER to research about the 5 top countries in visa and what would be our best practices. If you could tell us when will be the launching time, and if you get the results of the best practices yet, what can we expect?
Thank you. I know this is a study taking place right now. I don't know the details, so we can come back to you. I think this is one comment for our colleague. But this is indeed part of what we're trying to do to indeed dig deeper in the data. We see some really strong and what we call high-performing systems. What lessons can we learn from that? Digging deeper, looking at not just the PISA data, but also going deeper in terms of the national policies. What have they done with the data? And how have they broken down the data? Because we keep so far, we'll go deeper talking about averages and the lines going up, but there's so much more underneath there and backing that data. So we really want to learn from those countries what they've done with this. But having said that, we at the same time at the OECD are doing so many pieces of research. We are working very closely, for example, I manage a team, we're currently working, my team is working in 9 countries. We're trying to indeed look at the data, but all of the policies. So having a discussion in terms of what international students' assessments are saying, what is national data showing? It's very relevant and see what can we learn from the differences and commonalities there. What other pieces of research complement that? I think we just had Dr. Ruiz talking about the value and the importance of teachers, teacher policies, and school leadership assessment and evaluation. So we're really trying to work with the countries and go very deep to understand what is working really well, what's not working so well, we can help improve. The first point is very important, coming back to it. We really want to learn from the countries, from our member countries, but also the non-member countries. What can we learn and share in terms of good practices? I think the dialogue in the coming days will be very much geared towards that as well. What has been really working in the system, what we want to share and take forward in other countries. So this study that you mentioned, I think is going to be one of our high-profile studies, but at the same time, so many different studies going on. We are not only working with the high-performing systems, we have been working quite structurally also with some of the systems which are not doing so well, and now moving up. Actually, we're going to have a presentation after the coffee break about Wales in the UK. That's actually a system where I've been working for had the pleasure of working for 6 years, guiding working with Ministry through the reforms. They started at not such a good place, but they really were looking deeply in the data, what can we learn from it, can we do from other research. So we brought a few international examples to really help back that. It's not only the strong performers, but really those systems done some remarkable progress. And I think just looking at some of the data that we saw from presented over here with the TIMS, the PILS and the PISA, just some data sources. I think there's a lot we can learn from the OECD as well and among ourselves. So we'll come back to that question.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fawaz Abdullah from Education Research, Policy Research. And thank you so much for this event. And I would like to thank my crew also and Dr. Weiss also for this informative presentation. The first question is that, as you know, we are dealing with the human. We're not dealing with chemistry or anything that, because the human that can reflect based on many things. As you know, numbers, I think, doesn't affect the score exactly. We have to go very deep in these data. In that way, I think there is the very role of the qualitative study and qualitative research. What are your experiences to apply that qualitative researches to discover exactly the reasons behind the number of school students?
Thank you. I think this is indeed important to note because internationally, often when we start working with countries, they know us PISA, but which, as I said, is a very valuable deep source which has been evolving and going deeper and deeper. I think it's also quite important, for example, that we already saw we are dealing with humans, and in particular also with children, of course adults in terms of teachers, but in terms of children, it's not just the cognitive side and the hard achievements. We're asking for things like student motivation, which is so important. It's a self-reported data, so that's already going, it's a different way of going deeper and actually complementing data sources. That said, if you work with countries, so for example, I think the study just mentioned here, or the work we do, for example, in my team, and I think also with them, working a lot with countries trying to indeed do exactly just that, get for the quantitative data, but also the qualitative data. We really have to talk to the senior officials in the ministries, have to talk to the school leaders, the teachers, but also the students. What's really working in the system? What are some of the barriers people are facing? Trying to dig deeper. So it's always very much mixed methods. As soon as we start working with countries, very in depth, it really goes deep. We just done a study, just completed one in New South Wales, Australia. That's deep. We really went to all broad stakeholder consultations with teachers, with school leaders, with parents, looking at all the data, the national data, looking at dozens of study reports. But that's what we trying to work with countries to really go that deep to unpack the questions that the countries have. Because I think that's the key point as well. It's not us from the OECD coming in saying what the issues are that you should be looking at. No, what are the challenges that you're facing and the questions that you would like to have answered? You have to realize that some of these questions to be answered can take some time because there will be a deeper round of analysis and trying to work through some of the solutions. Research evidence and some creative solutions, I think, is there as well. We already heard some of the more innovative work taking place. There's a lot of innovation currently taking place, post COVID as well. There's a clear drive for that. So there will be this big exercise where we're working with many countries trying to find the solutions. And I think that's the fun part of it all. It's not easy, but it's indeed very much that mixed methods approach. So yes, even though we're very much talking here about the PISA, you'll see that in many of the discussions and the presentations that we have, it goes on trying to go much deeper to respond and acknowledge that. Are there any further questions before we break for coffee?
I will ask it by Arabic, please. طبعا من خلال العروض اللي لاحظناها في الفترة قبل شوية يعني لاحظنا أن مستوى دول مجلس التعاون نوعا ما مرضي، وعلى الرغم أن هناك كثير من المخصصات المالية تخصص للتعليم، أيضا المباني المدرسية مهيئة مقارنة بكثير من الدول اللي حصلت على تقييمات أفضل منا احنا. أيضا المعلمين وخاصة يمكن في البرامج الوطنية كعندنا احنا التعليم يتم تأهيلهم يعني في الجامعات والكليات تأهيل نلاحظ انه يوصل إلى مستويات مرضية حقيقة، ونشوف أدائهم حتى في المدارس يكون يعني كثير مرضي. يعني كل هذه المعطيات بالإضافة إلى أن يعني احنا صرنا في الفترات الماضية نستخدم أيضا مناهج دولية في التدريس والتدريس الرياضيات والعلوم. أنا فقط كل هذه المعطيات المفروض تعطينا نتائج مرضية، ولكن أنا عندي تحفظ في موضوع تقييمات هذه ومدى مصداقيتها. ما هي الإجراءات اللي يتم اتباعها بحيث أن احنا نضمن أن هذه النتائج اللي تطلع من جميع الدول تكون صادقة، بحيث أن احنا نقدر نقول أن احنا مستوياتنا واصلة إلى هذا المستوى. يعني أنا أريد أن يكون هناك في معايير، في إجراءات تضمن وصول هذه النتائج بمصداقية تجعلنا نقدر نقارن ما بين الدول. هذا هو سؤالي.
Yes, so I think so. You asked a very difficult question. I'm going to immediately acknowledge that. I think we're going to be working to actually, so quite a few of the issues that we raised, they're going to be discussed, and particularly also by Tariq and Lucia. But it's indeed that the discussion about the standards, of course, and as I mentioned, the national curricula, which is always a question, are some of the broader skills. Not a short answer now, but it is definitely something there. I think the technical aspects will definitely be covering. I think that's very much indeed with the Tariq and Lucia. I think the broader questions there is what are you doing about it? In terms of these results, how are you responding to that? It's often that we see countries do quite good things, just to say, and I don't know your specific context in your country or any of them, sorry, in that detail, but it's often that we see countries go with really good policies, but often in a fragmented way. That could be a way, could be part of the challenge, and it could be things also take time. We are very impatient human beings. We want to see results quick. We actually have, I think, one presentation needed of Wales, where we're now starting to see some results after, what is it, 7 years of hard reform. We keep one trajectory, but the results are going up, and it's very politically challenging. We have to recognize that, because ministers, they want to see results fast. So we actually have a minister presenting here who felt that pressure. But if there's a comprehensive strategy, all these policies are moving forward in the right direction. If there's often a clear strategy, and these policies are aligned, I think there's policy coherence. I've been hearing about this term quite a lot. It's something which we're seeing increasingly more of some of the more effective and high strong performing systems, those that are improving, are aligning their policies very well in terms of structures and all the next steps. I see that we need to go to coffee. But we'll definitely come to this. So I basically try to dodge work around your question, but it's a very difficult one that we hope to have answered by the end of this workshop. Okay. Coffee time. And practice. So how can these data from international student assessments and national assessments support and inform policy? My colleague Lynn will start with a short presentation, followed by a presentation by Kirsty Williams, former Minister of Education from Wales and the UK, and then 3 country examples, and then followed with a plenary discussion, bringing around some questions. So after the presentation of Kirsty and the countries, we'll be referring back to Kirsty first, if you have any questions towards her, and we'll then take it from there. So first, over to Lynn.
Okay, can you go? Here we go. So thank you, Marco. Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you here in Riyadh. So as you see, I'll be presenting a general overview presentation of how international assessments can contribute to policy making, with a focus on visa based on our experience, but obviously all of this applies to all the different international assessments on student learning. So basically, since the introduction of international assessments in the 1990s, the number of countries that have been participating has increased significantly to include the large majority of developed economies. This was partly driven by a shift in public sector culture towards outcome-based measurement and accountability. And in education, there was a greater demand for internationally comparative data about learning and about the underlying policies that influence student learning. And this was particularly spurred by a context in which education was now seen as a way to measure a country's economic potential. So this has contributed to a greater focus on quality of education rather than just quantity. And countries are now seeking to learn what students know and know how to do when at a certain stage in their education, or particularly when they leave the schooling system. So for example, PISA, as Nyako said earlier today, it measures what students know at 15 years old, which tends to coincide with the end of basic education in the majority of countries. In addition to that, countries are starting to be interested in the link between student outcomes and certain policies at the national, regional, and even at the school level, as well as the broader contextual factors that can impact student learning, for example, gender or socioeconomic background, or even the location of the school. So today I'll be focusing on 4 ways in which international assessments can influence policy. Starting with, of course, the fact that international assessments can provide internationally comparative measure of the quality of an education system. Then it can provide insights into some of the policies that have been shown to potentially positively impact student outcomes. It also often leads to public discussions and debates in the media, which can have an impact on setting the agenda in the policy-making process. And finally, it can support a broader culture of evaluation and assessment, as Dr. mentioned. So to start with the first point, as you know, international assessments provide an internationally comparative measure of the quality and the equity of a country's education system. They go beyond the result to go deeper into what students know and know how to do. So, for example, they show the different proficiency levels of students. So what does PISA level 2 translate to in terms of student knowledge or competencies? They also show the share of over and underperformers in a country and the gaps in performance, for example, based on student or school characteristics, as I said, such as gender gap or rural, urban, private, public, etc. And it can even provide item-level data, which we will see later with Tarek, on how students perform on different content questions or different cognitive subdomains. So this helps countries get a measure of their education system that is stable and that allows them to monitor their progress over time and even compare their performance with other meaningful benchmarks from among their regional peers or global peers, which can serve as an opportunity for mutual learning and exchange. So, the second way in which international assessment can influence policy is that it can provide insights into certain practices and policies at the school, regional, and national level that have an impact on student outcomes. So, for example, PISA data has shown a correlation between student outcomes and different types of policies related to selecting and grouping students. So, for example, class size or grade retention. Resources invested in education, so this can include instructional material or technology. Resources invested in the instructional staff, so as was mentioned earlier, initial teacher training and professional development. And finally, curriculum and pedagogy. So, for example, teaching quality or opportunity to learn, etc. However, it's important not to confuse correlation with causation. So, PISA or other international assessments cannot provide definitive evidence of the impact of the policy on student outcomes, but it can raise important policy questions for policymakers that can be further investigated through national research or international research. So third, as you know, international assessment results tend to generate a lot of media buzz, particularly on the final result, as well as discussions in the public domain. So this can either lead to discussions among the general public about education issues or education policy, but also among policy circles about how to improve student outcomes. So this general interest and public debate on education issues can help countries push forward certain reforms or policies that are needed to improve student outcomes. So for instance, there are some countries that experience what we call a PISA shock. which is when their results in the first rounds of PISA are lower than expected or they reveal a significant gap in their student learning. So an example of this is Switzerland, and although they performed among the top 20 performers in PISA in the first round, they showed that 20% of their students only scored at level 1 and level 2 of competency in reading. So this was used to push forward some attempts at reform and innovation, notably something called the HARMO-S project, which they used to harmonize the 26 cantonal school systems in Switzerland. And they also used it to push forward different PISA-informed recommendations related to school accountability, quality assurance, social equity, etc. So they managed to do it in just a few years, even though this had been in the works for years. And so finally, as I said, the increased focus on student outcomes can help lead to national focus on evaluation and assessment. So countries are now investing in their national evaluation and assessment systems. And this has included different forms. So first, the introduction of standards, the establishment of quality assurance agencies that can undertake such evaluation and assessments. So we've seen an increase since the start of international assessments. Introduction of national assessments that are aligned with national learning objectives and that complement international assessments. So some of these national assessments were based on the methodology of PISA or other international assessments. For example, using a similar assessment framework as the one used in PISA. And this has also translated into an exchange of experiences from international assessments to national assessments and expertise. And some education systems, such as Sweden, which we will hear about later, have capitalized on the international assessments to link them to national longitudinal surveys that allow them to measure the progression of a certain cohort across time, so their progress, their pathways, their risk factors, so linking both national and international studies. And finally, countries have also used PISA and other international assessments as a measure of system performance. So they have reported on the results of PISA or other international assessments as part of their status of education reports or other reports that monitor system performance. And they've used their results as a benchmark or to set national goals and monitor outcomes. So to conclude, we've seen in the research that different instances in which PISA and other international assessments have influenced policies in certain countries. So there was an early stakeholder survey that was done by the OECD in 2008 for the countries that participated in the 3 first rounds of PISA, and it showed that stakeholders said that there was a positive influence of PISA with regards to the development of national standards, establishment of national institutes for evaluation, changes in the curriculum, introduction of targeted educational programs, increased allocation of resources to schools, and increased collaboration among key stakeholders. So these are some of the policies which PISA has informed countries on. So, for example, multiple countries like Korea, Mexico, Greece, Luxembourg, and Wales have revised their curriculum to align it with the PISA framework and include some of the competencies that PISA tests. In Austria, various studies have documented the influence of their participation in international assessment in the establishment of an evaluation and assessment culture in the country. So with the establishment of education standards, specific agency for evaluation and assessments, and the development of a national assessment which didn't exist before their participation in international assessment. And this is also mirrored in Denmark and Luxembourg and all other countries. So to conclude, these are just some of the highlights of how public policy can be informed or influenced from PISA participation in PISA and other international assessments. This will be explored in much more depth in some of the case studies from OECD countries and also from your presentations as ABES countries. So we really look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
So now I think we're directly going over towards the presentation of Kirsty. Kirsty, do give us a minute. We just switch. I'll give you a sign as soon as we see you on the screen over here. Okay, trying to work it.
Good morning.
Yes, Kirsty, can we hear you? But we're trying to get basically your presentation on the screen over here. So please give us a minute.
Okay, please let me know if I can do anything on my end. Maybe I've done something wrong.
I think it's on our side. And yes, Kirsty, we have you here. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Or as we would say in Wales, Boregal, Pal. I'm so sorry not to be able to join you in person in Riyadh, but I'm speaking to you from a very happy Wales this morning, following our performance in the World Cup last night. I've been asked by Mark Owen to give you some reflections from the Welsh education system and our experience of being part of the PISA family. My name is Kirsty Williams. I am the former Minister for Education in the Welsh Government, and I served as Education Minister from 2016 to 2021. And during that time, worked closely with Marco and his colleagues in the OECD to support the development of education policy in my country. This morning, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the context and the history of our working with the OECD and our involvement in PISA, what PISA told us about our system, and how we use that information and data to inform policy and to launch the largest reform programme in education in Wales in a generation. But also to understand that participation in PISA is more than simply just participating in the assessment itself. So that's what I'd like to talk to you about in the short time I have with you this morning. So to set the context and a little bit of history, Wales is an ancient but small nation. We have a population of, as you can see on the screen there, it's not very large. But education policy was devolved to the new Welsh Parliament in 1999. Prior to 1999, all education policy was set by the Westminster government at a UK level for the constituent parts of the United Kingdom. But following referendum in 1998, both Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland established their own parliaments, and education policy was moved from London to our capital in Cardiff. Wales is a bilingual nation, which means we have two official languages, English and Welsh, and that means our education system is quite diverse for a small country, in the sense that we have schools that operate through the medium of English. All tuition, all teaching happens through the medium of English, but we also have schools where the entirety of the curriculum is delivered through the medium of Welsh, and we do have some schools in between that do some of their teaching through English and some of their teaching through Welsh. So we're a bilingual nation and a bilingual education system. We have approximately 1,473 schools and just over 35,000 registered teachers in our teacher council. Teacher-pupil ratios, as you can see, range, depending on what phase of education that you are in, but typically in secondary schools, and that's schools that cover 11 to 16 years of age, the teacher ratio is approximately 1 to 17. And unfortunately, Wales is a relatively poor part of the United Kingdom, which means that 20% of the pupils that attend our schools are entitled to receive free meals whilst they're at school. And we use in Wales that figure as a proxy for relative deprivation. So that's our standard of measuring whether a child would come from an economically deprived family, and that is their ability to qualify for free meals whilst they are at school. So as you can see, 20% is, unfortunately, a large section of our school community. And Wales first joined the PISA family in 2006. So you've just heard from Lynn about the PISA shock. Well, Wales had its very own PISA shock. Not so much in 2006 when we first entered the programme, but in the next set of assessments in 2009 that saw our scores across all 3 domains be significantly lower than the OECD average. And for us, as part of the United Kingdom, Wales's scores were significantly lower than other parts of the United Kingdom in all domains. So when compared with other parts of the United Kingdom, we fared very poorly. As Lynn said in a previous presentation, this led to considerable debate, both within policymaking circles, within the teaching and education profession, as well as in the media and in society in general, about the state and the quality of Welsh education. Unfortunately, we went on, despite changes that were made in that time, to see further disappointing scores in the further 2 subsequent rounds of PISA, which was very disappointing and held up a real mirror to perhaps what we had been telling ourselves in Wales about the quality of our education. The data, of course, though, is so much richer than the scores in each of the domains. It gave us rich information around how individual parts of the cohort were performing. We were very worried to find that our more able and talented students were less prevalent in our scores compared to other nations. We also had issues with our less able learners. So it gave us rich information about the achievement of cohorts of students, and of course told us and reinforced some messages that the profession has been telling the government around issues around equipment in schools, particularly IT connectivity and IT equipment, as well as other resources. And the assessment also asks our students a number of questions. And although our students reported that they felt that they were doing well in their studies, the data also told us that our students were, on average, more worried and anxious about their futures and had less feelings of well-being. So it was a very clear message from our students that there were well-being issues that we needed to address within our system. So I think it's really important to remember that PISA was just so much more than just giving us a ranking and letting us see where we sat amongst other nations. What it allowed myself and previous education ministers to do was exactly as Lynn described. It was a call to action across the system and indeed beyond the system, and allowed us to create the space and the permission to set out
Kirsty, we briefly...
the quality of our education system.
Yeah, Kirsty, sorry, you will go for 30 seconds. We didn't hear you for 30 seconds, sorry. Please proceed on.
Okay. It is impossible in the time available this morning to go into depth to every aspect of our education reforms that were sparked and informed by the data from our PISA assessments. But I would just want to give you a few examples to demonstrate the sheer breadth of influence that our participation in PISA allowed us to take action and informed action. At the centre of our reform programme was a serious review of our curriculum and the nature of what was happening in our schools. This was initially started by a predecessor of myself, and on coming into office, I received an independent report on how we could reform our curriculum to ensure that our students were having the knowledge, the skills and experiences that they would need to be successful in their futures. That independent report by Professor Graham Donaldson of Scotland was the impetus for a widespread engagement with the education profession within Wales and led to the first ever curriculum for Wales being developed in Wales by our profession in a spirit of co-production. This was very, very different from the way in which curriculum had been developed previously, which had not been co-produced with the profession and was the bedrock and the centre of our reform programme. The curriculum focused on not just the acquisition of knowledge, but also how that knowledge could be applied, which of course is very much a core part of what PISA assesses, and also look to break down the silos in which individual subjects were taught. So looking at an interdisciplinary approach to knowledge and skills, with a strong focus on creativity and interdisciplinarity across the subjects. Of course, no education system can exceed the quality of the people who deliver education on a daily basis. And therefore we move to a radical programme of reform in professional development, both for our teaching assistants who are non-registered and qualified teachers that work alongside teachers in our classrooms, through to our classroom teachers, and to those who find themselves in the position of leadership. We completely revamped our initial teacher education programmes in our universities to align to our new curriculum, and put together a comprehensive package of professional development support for those teachers already in the system. One of the things that PISA told us was that our school leaders, our head teachers, had high levels of autonomy and were expected to make a whole raft of decisions from their own professional standpoint of view, but there was very little support and training for head teachers once they had reached that position. And therefore, we worked to establish an organisation within Wales, a National Academy of Education Leadership, to support those that aspired to lead our schools and provide continuing support and professional development for those that had reached positions of leadership. And we also relaunched a project to establish a Masters in Education programme, which had really not been successful in the past, and we have revamped those opportunities. Lynn talked about assessment reform. One of my predecessors on receipt of disappointing PISA results looked to establish exactly what Lynn talked about, which was a new system of national assessment and testing, which had not existed in Wales before, as well as the establishment of both literacy and numeracy frameworks. On coming into office in 2016, we felt that both of those things had been right at the time, but we were able to move on with our programme of assessment, moving from standardised testing once a year in our schools through to adaptive testing regimes, which allowed teachers and schools to tailor-make assessments depending on the ability of individual children and the ability to administer those tests at numerous points in the year to track individual student progress. So a significant departure from what we had before. Our teachers were also telling us in the PISA survey about the fact that the infrastructure in many schools did not meet our aspirations for a high quality and high performing education system. So just one example of how we responded to this was to ensure within the first year of my coming to office that all schools had adequate internet connectivity, which had not been the case previously. We also worked hard on a national programme of IT procurement to ensure that there was equity in the IT capabilities of all our schools. And we worked closely with Microsoft, for instance, to be able to strike a deal that allowed the distribution of our Microsoft software across all our schools, again to overcome problems of equity and also actually to drive real value. We were able to save our schools a significant amount of money by doing that at a national level. And I think that, through all of this, we had to keep the child in the centre of our thinking. And what young people were telling us was concerning about issues around their well-being. So we worked across government with colleagues, for instance, in the Ministry of Health, to develop better support for children, especially within the areas of mental health and well-being. Participation in PISA, though, enabled us to form trusted and deep working relationships with our colleagues in PISA. And I'm so pleased to be able to see Marco today, who was absolutely, so helpful to us in helping us with our reform journey. PISA gave us an invaluable, rich and evidence base from which to, convince people where they needed convincing of the need to change and to implement reform. It also enabled us to establish strong peer-to-peer learning links with other systems. So I was able to speak to counterparts in other countries to discuss with them how they would use PISA to inform their journeys. And it gave us really important external oversight and accountability in a supportive way, but also in a really challenging way as well. And the upshot, the consequence of this very, very important working relationship was real impact for our pupils and for our system. And I'm pleased to say we were able to ensure that in the last set of published PISA scores, we found ourselves back at scores that were at the OECD average, and we had closed the gap with the other nations of the United Kingdom. And we had been able to demonstrate that those children who are from economically deprived backgrounds in our system were able to overcome their disadvantage better than in other areas. And we saw real results in other aspects of how we measure our education system. For instance, examinations at the age of 18 and the number of children moving on to study at our very highest and most prestigious universities in the United Kingdom and indeed around the world. So Marco, that's a whistle-stop tour of how a PISA shock led to real partnership and real progress for the Welsh education system. And I'm grateful to colleagues for their attention this morning. But I will just leave you with these final messages. There's no such thing as a job done in education. What PISA told us was it was important not to strive to be perfect, but to strive for progress, which is what we were able to do. And with the help of the OECD and PISA, we were able to do what is there quoted on the screen. That Wales has done its best, but what Wales had done was the best bet to improve education. And we had created a system with clarity of vision for policy coherence, and we had made considerable progress. So from a politician's perspective and a policy perspective, we felt that participation in PISA, although painful at times, was a fundamental pillar of how we have moved education policy and made real impact for our children and young people. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Kirsty. We actually would like to propose a small change in the agenda, Kirsty, that we immediately go to questions for yourself. This because I see the interest from the colleagues over here. That also allows you to, after this session, go on with other tasks that you have. So, colleagues, I'm looking in the room. Any questions for Kirsty?
Thank you, Lynn and Kirsty. It seems to me, not all countries, but some countries improve their education performance after PISA shock. So the problem here, if some countries had vaccine against PISA shock, what we have to do? Because many countries actually from 2001 until now, they don't care about the result of PISA and other international assessments. My question is if we can in this workshop to find any way, just like guideline, to also to get benefit from some experience and some countries that improve their result, how we can actually get benefit from this experience and also the experience of the experts to like guide these countries to improve their performance and also to evaluate their policy after 4 years or so, or some for example a period of time. So I think this is the problem for many Arabic countries, not I say just the Gulf states, and also we have to bridge this gap, as I agree actually with presenters about we have to investigate the data, not just to look at the ranking, not just ranking as Kirsty said, but also to investigate the result of the factors that behind this result. And Kirsty mentioned 7 factors. So my question to all presenters, can get the benefit from the country's experience, and also we can get like draft or guidelines that we can use it as Gulf states countries. Thank you.
Kirsty, if you allow us, we'll do 2 more questions and I'll give you a chance to answer. Is that okay?
Thank you for the presentation. Actually, I want to go deep in our recommendation in our result. As you see in our Gulf, we have large number of low achievers. So how you can do, as you know, direction of the recommendation from you or based on your experience, how can you do for the low achiever, how we increase them to be pass them out of the lower level of achieving in the PISA or in the TIMS. This is very important question because if you solve this issue, I think will our result increase in our countries.
Okay. We have one more question.
Thank you, President. I hope you enjoy watching the World Cup also. We are waiting for our national team like less than 1 hour. I agree with you that no, it is not just about the ranking. And as you know, and my colleagues know, there is no size fits all. And based on all the actions that you have been taking to increase the score of your students, can you tell us what was the key change or the fundamental change? What was that? If you ask you about one thing that the key change or the fundamental change, what would you say?
Okay, over to you, Kirsten. These are some really challenging questions. They already challenged me this morning as well, so now over to you. But I think you got some really good answers on these difficult questions.
I think I heard what everybody said. I think the last gentleman that spoke, sir, you are so right. One size does not fit all. And I think what's really, really important is to recognise education in the context in which you're delivering your education. So something that worked in Wales might work in Wales, but I think it's a real danger that policymakers can fall into if they think they can take an intervention from one country where it has worked and simply move it to another country. For instance, I discovered this when I talked to colleagues from Portugal that had done really had scored previously badly in PISA and had a really progressive journey and had then scored really well. When I asked Portugal how they had gone about that, one of the main things that they attributed to their success was closing their small rural schools in the countryside and busing their children to larger urban schools. Well, in Wales, that would not have been an acceptable response. That wouldn't have been right for us. So it was right for Portugal, but it would not, in the context of how we deliver education in Wales, be right for us. So I think it's really important that you see education reform in the context of your own particular nation and your own particular of culture and how you do education in your country. But I think there are some absolute fundamentals that apply, everywhere. And firstly, that is the quality of teaching. No system can be better than the quality of the people that work with our children and young people. So I think for us, a strong emphasis on school leadership and on the quality of teaching was really important. And also setting high standards. We had been perhaps not honest with ourselves and not honest with our profession about how we were doing. We thought we were doing fine. PISA showed us we weren't doing fine. That allowed us to work with our teaching unions, to say, come on, we've got to demand and we've got to expect better. I think also, the literacy and numeracy frameworks that were put in place by my predecessor and assessment reform was also really important after that first initial shock. And then the other thing that I think was really important, we had a lot of underperformance in our more able and talented children. Now, so we had never really put in place a program to really extend those children and to really push them. I think that made a difference. And I think also actually having a conversation with our schools about the importance of PISA and how PISA could build public confidence in an education system. And we really need public confidence in our system, don't we? All of us as policymakers really want our public to feel confident. But low PISA scores was undermining the profession and undermining public confidence. So actually getting the schools to take it seriously as well, I think was also an important part of that dialogue that we talked about earlier. The gentleman asked about lower achievers. How did we respond to lower achievers? Well, one of the issues that we know impacted upon our lower achievers is economic deprivation. So Wales introduced additional financial resources for children that were entitled to free school meals. So for every child in your school that was entitled to free school meals, you had an additional payment of resources so that you could increase the number of staff or the intervention programs that you could deploy in your schools. We also reformed the way in which we support children with additional learning needs. So in any education system, you will have children with additional learning needs. Some of those learning needs will be high prevalence, there'll be lots of it, but their impact on learning is low. You will have then other children at the other end of that spectrum who have really, really profound learning disabilities and profound learning needs and physical health problems. So we also had to look at the way in which we were supporting children with additional learning needs. Now, these are longer term policy reforms that we will see whether that has an impact in the years to come. But we look to really support those children from a poorer economic background. And we've seen some progress. And importantly, what PISA told us was that those children from a poorer background were able to overcome their disadvantage relatively well. Not all, not perfectly, but relatively well. So there's some optimism there. And then going back to the point about civic engagement. In our country, policy and political debate is dominated by the NHS and the health service. And so it's very, very hard to get a hearing for education in political circles. But my goodness me, the PISA shock certainly gave us the opportunity to create the political space to talk about education and to get additional resources for Welsh education. It also gave us an opportunity to broaden those conversations beyond the classroom. So for instance, with our universities, what were the role our universities were playing to help schools in their local area to be better? What were our universities doing in the field of research so that we had more information specifically for Wales about how we could find out how our system was doing, with business, engaging with with businesses and with people in the private sector to understand how they can help the Welsh education system. So when we talked about a national mission, we talked about everybody in the country having an opportunity to help improve Welsh education. Everybody had a role. So it wasn't just the job of teachers and the education minister, it was the job of everybody in Wales to think about how they can contribute. And I think that created a real sense of momentum around education reform, because reform is not easy. So if you're a policymaker, a politician, policymaker, or if you're a civil servant that is tasked with implementing change, it can be really difficult to do that. Let's be honest, there are people in the system who don't want to change. They are comfortable, they're happy with how things are, and reform takes a lot of work and a lot of energy. But PISA allowed us, as I said, to hold a mirror up to ourselves and to really question and to make us accountable in a way that perhaps we weren't accountable as a system before. So for us, it was really important to have those scores, but it was really important for us to move beyond simply the ranking and the score, but to use that information in a much broader way to make the case for a reform programme and to work with our profession to deliver it. And I feel COVID notwithstanding, because of course the pandemic has had a massive impact on all of our systems, hasn't it? So I think I'm a bit anxious that some of the reforms have been delayed or impacted upon because of the COVID pandemic. but I'm confident that we've put in place the right things that we need to do to give education in Wales the chance, but you've got to give it time as well. You know, I was very lucky. I inherited a bad set of PISA results. When I was the minister, we managed to get the best of PISA results. But it wasn't just the things that I had done in those intervening years, it was decisions that had been taken. So I think that's the other important thing to remember, is that you can't fix some of this stuff overnight. It is it's a longer journey, and it has to be sustained, and it has to be coherent. Asking schools to do one thing today and the next year rushing off in a different direction is really disconcerting and really difficult for the profession. So actually having some coherence and longevity and sticking to the plan, even when there are bumps in the road, is really important, I think, for the profession.
Okay, thank you, Kirsty, for this really well and good answers. I think you covered all the issues that have been raised. So we want to thank you for your time, Kirsty, and very much appreciated also by the colleagues here in the room, and hope to see you soon in Cardiff again. So hope to be coming over because it's been a long time. So thank you again, and hope to be in touch soon.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Okay, that brings us to the next set of presentations. So, can I ask I think we have 3 representatives from 3 countries presenting. So, please come forward, and then afterwards we'll do some further questions. But thank you very much already for these very good questions. And if you have any further questions about the Welsh case, we can share further information, because as I said, we've been very much involved in this. And Wales has started to become one of the, let's say, the new Finlands, where the education tourism is going to. So many countries are currently going to Wales to learn from that practice. But as Kirsty rightly said, and very importantly, it's all about context. Okay. Can I ask the presenters to come forward and
الحقيقة سعداء بوجودنا في هذه الورشة صراحة تحت العنوان الحيوي في الاستفادة من التقييمات والدراسات الدولية تعقد منها منظمة OECD ومنظمة التي يخص تمييز البيانات. ما يخفى الحقيقة عليكم. أولاً بداية أن زميلكم يسأل عن وزارة التعليم السعودية مكتب التعليم العام، وفيما يتصل بمشاركة المملكة في التقييمات الدولية تلمس وبيزا وفارس. الحقيقة يعني المملكة وزارة التعليم السعودية الحقيقة يعني حريصة جدا على المشاركة في مثل هذه التقييمات والدراسات الدولية، يعني خصوصا انها من جهات عالمية رصينة تقدم لنا يعني التقييمات وتحليلات وتحدد موقع نظام التعليم الحقيقة عالميا، وهذا شيء مفيد وصحي جدا الحقيقة لمن يريد الإصلاح في النظام التعليمي. وأتوقع وأظن أنه أول خطوة للإصلاح education reforming هو الوقوف أمام المشكلة الحقيقة والتعرف على موقعنا الطبيعي في العالم. عندنا هيئة تقويم التعليم والتدريب في المملكة هي المشرفة على تنفيذ والتواصل مع المنظمة الدولية وتنفيذ الاختبارات والدراسات وما يتبع ذلك من نتائج وتحليلاتها، وتزود هذه وزارة التعليم. ووزارة التعليم الحقيقة يعني خصوصا في هذه المرحلة في ظل وجود رؤية المملكة 2030 ووجود استراتيجية وطنية للتدريب والتعليم والتدريب في المملكة، يعول الحقيقة كثيرا على انعكاس نتائج الطلاب في المملكة وتحسنها كمؤشرات استراتيجية لنجاح هذه الاستراتيجية وتحققها وتحقق المبادرات التي تضمن هذه الاستراتيجية. الحقيقة يعني عندنا يعني بعيدا عن التحليلات الفنيه وتحليلات المشاركات والارقام ربما يكون الزملاء المتداخلين قبل أغرب في هذا المجال. ويعني مع الاسف يعني المملكه ودول الخليج تقع تحت خط المتوسط، وهو يعني دون المأمول الحقيقه لنا في المنظمه التعليميه. نحن الصراحه بقوه انه نستفيد من هذه التقارير حتى وان كانت حقيقه دون المأمول بمراحل الحقيقه، ودون ما يعني تقدم تحديد الدول مجلس التعاون الامكانيات والصرف على الجانب التعليمي في دولة. يعني المملكه الحقيقه تستفيد ايضا من هذه التقييمات الدوليه في موضوع في مختلف المجالات، يعني السياسات والتشريعات والمناهج وما يتصل بها من اوزان يعني نسبيه للمهارات والمواضيع والخطط التدريسيه، وايضا في مجال التقنيه توظيف التقنيه، يعني المبادرات النافعه يعني كانت في ازمه كورونا اللي اجتاحت العالم، يعني تحولت المملكه بشكل قوي لايجاد بدائل يعني تقنيه والتحول للتعليم الالكتروني وايجاد منصات للاختبارات المركزيه والمحوسبه. وهذه يعني من طرف الزميل المتداخل عن بعد اللي هو اصبح الطالب يعني في هذه الايام يقرا من الشاشات اكثر من الورق، فاصبح النص يعني طبيعي بالنسبه للطالب هو ما يقراه من هذه الشاشات، يكون يعني اكثر طبيعيه وملامس الواقع اليومي. فيعني الحقيقه يعني عندنا يعني اصلاحات شامله في جميع النواحي في المدخلات والعمليات، ونحن ان شاء الله نعكس ذلك على المخرجات بشكل كبير ونحقق المستهدفات بالاختبارات الدوليه. راح في العروض القادمه ان شاء الله راح يتضح يعني مدى حضور هذه الدراسات والاختبارات الدوليه في كمؤشرات استراتيجيه على الاداء في المبادرات وفي الاستراتيجيه الوطنيه. هذا بالمجمل الحقيقه، وربما يكون ان شاء الله في السنوات القادمه مزيد من التحول. طبعا بالنسبه للشرائح هذه يعني توضح مستوى المملكه العربيه السعوديه وحدود المتوسط العالمي في اختبار بيزا، وايضا في ما يتعلق بتمس في الرياضيات والعلوم في الصفين الثاني والرابع. يعني نستخلص من هذه النتائج ومن هذه الاختبارات الدوليه انه الحقيقه عدد السنوات التمدرس الحقيقيه للطالب في المملكه ما يتجاوز 7.9 من 12 سنه تعليميه، يعني في المراحل التعليميه الابتدائي والثانوي، وهو ما يمكن الحقيقه من التعامل يعني يكسب مهارات حقيقه التعامل مع اشياء بيسك في الحياه، بينما يعني اصبح يعني الاتجاه العالمي في ايجاد يعني مهارات اكثر يعني تقدما، يمكن الطالب من التعامل مع اشياء معقده ومركبه اكثر، يعني كومبلكس حاجات اكثر تعقيدا. كما هو الطالب في اليابان مثل اسم المثال يعني يحتاج 7 يعني قريب لانه يكون كل المسيره فعاله في التعليم. يعني نعمل ان شاء الله ولنا طموح كبير جدا ان شاء الله، والعمل جاري في وزاره التعليم السعوديه على قدم المساق في يعني التحولات الطبيعيه لمركز التعليم في جميع بلدان العالم، من الترانسميشن موديل للسوشيال موديل للسيلف ريجوليتد موديل، لاكتساب الطالب المهارات اللازمه يعني او المهارات للاقتصاد القائم على المعرفه ومهارات الثوره الصناعيه الرابعه. يعني هذا بالمجمل، وحقيقه ما احب اطيل عليكم الزملاء المتداخلين قبل يعني في المجال، وشكرا.
مساء الخير جميعا، يعطيكم الف عافيه وشاكرين جدا المقدمين. لإتاحة الفرصة لدولة الإمارات أن تشارك تأثير التقييمات الدولية على السياسات في دولة الإمارات في عجالة. هي 3 دقائق، أعتقد أن الموضوع إعجازي شوي، لكن إحنا بنحاول قد ما نقدر إن شاء الله ننخرط فيها. دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة فيها العديد من الجهات التعليمية المحلية. فيها دبي KHDA اللي هي مشرفة على المدارس الخاصة في دبي. عندنا دائرة التعليم والمعرفة في أبو ظبي. عندنا المدارس الحكومية في الدولة تشرف عليها التعليم التي أنشئت قبل 3 سنوات. وعندنا سبيا أو هيئة الشارجة للتعليم الخاص التي تشرف على المدارس الخاصة في الشارجة، ويقود كل الجهات التعليمية حتى الآن وزارة التربية والتعليم. بالإضافة إلى ذلك يشرف على التوجهات العامة للتعليم في دولة الإمارات المجلس الأعلى للتعليم والموارد البشرية بقيادة الشيخ عبد الله بن زايد. كما سنشارك حضراتكم خبر يعتبر حصري بخصوص الهيئات التي تشرف على جودة الاختبارات الدولية والوطنية. الهدف ليش احنا نعرض لحضراتكم هذه الأمور؟ أن لدينا عينات ضخمة جدا نشارك فيها، لدينا بيانات ضخمة جدا. فهي الفكرة أنت قاعد تشارك كل سنة، لكن شو قاعد تسوي بهذه البيانات؟ وكيف تقدر من خلال هذه الجهات أنك تفعل الدعم والمساندة سواء للمعلمين للقيادات وأيضا للطلاب. مثل ما حضراتكم شايفين عندنا هني النموذج والنموذج المطلوب. يعني احنا في البداية لما شاركنا احنا قاعدين نشارك. بداية دبي شاركت في 2007 في الاختبارات الدولية. في 2009 بدأت الإمارات تشارك كدولة في الاختبارات الدولية. فكان يهمنا ان احنا نكون قاعدة بيانات وندرب الفرق وننمي القدرات الداخلية. نوعي الميدان التربوي بأهمية الدراسات الدولية، وأعتقد نشترك جميعا كيف أن هذا الأمر يتطلب منا مجهود. أن المدارس تقدر أنها تشارك في هذه الاختبارات بينما هو مش موجود لا في المجموع والطلاب وأولياء الأمور، وهذا الريزيستنس كامل أكيد كلنا واجهناه. تحليل البيانات والبحوث التربوية بدأت على استحياء. يعني الكل منا كان يركز على تقارير المنظمات، وبعد ذلك ابتدينا ناخذ بعض التحاليل ونركب ونطلق الكثير من التوصيات والكثير من المبادرات، وبعد ذلك رفع القرارات المبنية على البيانات للتعليم. فدولة الإمارات في عندها يعني في كونسبت عام اللي هو الطموح والوصول والضغط والمسارعات والمكملات والمبادرات. فكان في كمية ريسورس خيالية دخلت للمدارس. في مجموعة كبيرة من السياسات اتخذت. احنا حسيناها في الميدان التربوي انها ممكن تكون مؤثرة. يمكن هني قال كلمة انك لازم تثبت التوجه للمدارس فترة طويلة عشان الناس تعتاد. احنا عندنا تغييرات جبارة تستوي في وقت قصير. يعني يتغير المنهج كامل من جريد 1 to grade 12 في السنة، وتدرب المعلمين عليه وتخليهم جاهزين في سنة. كيف سويناها؟ انك انت تطلق عدة سياسات وتغييرات وتنشئ هيئات. هذا سريع جدا. مش شرط نقول ايجابي او سلبي، لكن الطموح والدفع والتركيز على التعليم هي اولوية بالنسبة لدولة الامارات، ما فيها تهاون. الان كيف نموذج المطلوب؟ احنا الان عندنا القاعدة، احنا مش مضطرين نوسع كل جهودنا ان يشارك عدد كبير. يمكن دولة الامارات تشارك فول سايز، يعني احنا جميع الطلاب المستهدفين يشاركون في الاختبار. احنا ما ناخذ عينة. فعادة مشاركاتنا في الدراسات الدولية تتجاوز 60,000 طالب 30,000 طالب، ما نشارك بعينة. وكان هذا توجه معين عند الشيخ عبد الله بن زايد. كذلك تدريب الفرق، احنا اصبح لدينا اصلا فريق في كل مدرسة يعرف شو الاختبارات الوطنية والدولية، ونحن في صدد ان احنا نسوي الرخصة الدولية للاختبارات. شو معناته؟ اي حد في المدارس لازم يكون عنده هذه الرخصة انه فاهم شو هي التقييمات العالية المستوى. والتوعية ايضا ما زالت تستمر دائما. تحليل البيانات والبحوث التربوية والقرارات التحسينية هي التي أصبحت تأخذ أكبر كم من جهودنا. فبقول لحضراتكم مثلا في السلايد اللي بعد احنا شو سوينا؟ بالنسبة للمناهج احنا الان موضوع الرانكينج يمكن طلعنا من هذا التأثير، مثل ما كان في صدمة بيزا على بعض الدول ان تفاجأوا كيف نتائج الطلاب منخفضة، احنا لدينا صدمة من نوع آخر. مش مسألة رانكينج وبس، كان الكل تحت تأثير ان احنا قبل، احنا بعد، اي دولة قبل. هذا التأثير الزائل اعتقد انه راح، ابتدينا نركز الحقيقة اللي لازم كلنا نعمل لأجلها. هل طلابنا لديهم مهارات القرن ال21 فعلا؟ هل هم مستعدين يكونون طلاب عالميين وين ما راحوا أي دولة في العالم يقدرون ينجزون؟ هل هو يتوفر لديه نفس الكفاءة التعليمية الموجودة عند أي طالب في إحدى الدول المتقدمة في اختبارات بيزا؟ هذا اللي يهمنا وهذا التركيز. ففي بالنسبة لي المناهج صارت فيه جهود كبيرة جدا، غير المنصات اللي هي تحوي مواد مماثلة للي متوفر في الاختبارات الدولية. صار في تغيير مناهج، يعني أنا بكلمكم عن مبادرة بسيطة اللي هي مبادرة تعديل مناهج الرياضيات والعلوم في الصف الرابع والثامن. هاي استمرت ل4 سنين، مسكنا الصف الأول ومسكنا الصف الخامس، مسكنا الثاني والسادس والثالث والسابع والرابع والثامن، استمرت 4 سنين. نسوي موائمة بين المناهج وبين مخرجات التعليم في دراسة تمس، ونتأكد من صياغة الأسئلة بشكل مماثل لدراسة تمس. إحنا قاعدين نقيس نفس المهارات. كذلك عدد كبير من المنصات التعليمية متاحة للطلاب وأولياء الأمور والمعلمين. منصة ألف توفر بيانات أسبوعية للمعلم، قاعدة تقول أن الطالب هذا فاهم الأوتكمز هذا ولا لا، يعيد شرح، في عندهم ريسورس يقدرون يرجعوا لها. كذلك عندنا مناهج تغيرت مثل منهج سلامة. منهج سلامة بنفس طريقة يعني دراسة بيلز، هو يركز أيضا على القراءة. استحدثنا منصة أخرى اسمها نحلة وناهل للقصص بنفس طريقة بيلز. بالنسبة لتحليل النتائج، مثل ما كنا نتكلم أن تحليل النتائج لو أخذناه بالشكل السطحي مش كفاية، فسوينا مثل مبادرات مع الجامعات اسمها الميتاكوجنيشن، ما وراء المعرفة. شو أكثر العوامل فعلا المؤثرة على الطلاب؟ شو الأشياء اللي إحنا ما التفتنا لها وقاعدة تأثر؟ مدى الكورليشن اللي موجود ما بين الفاكتورز وما بين النتائج. طلعنا بعدة أمور لازم ننتبه أن موضوع التنمر في المدارس قاعد يلعب دور، وهذا يبين من خلال الاستبيانات. على ضوءه إحنا غيرنا سياسة التنمر في دولة الإمارات بحيث تكون very strict، ما في تهاون مع المتنمرين. الأنظمة اللي قاعدين يدربون عليها المعلمين عشان يكتشفون المتنمرين ويتعاملون معاهم وإعادة تأهيلهم، السايكولوجيست الموجودين في المدارس، هذا كله قاعد يتطور بناء على نتائج التقييمات الدولية. كذلك التحصيل المدرسي كيف قاعد يتأثر بالحضور والغياب. الحضور والغياب أن يكون الولي الأمر يقول لك أنا اللي مسؤول عن حضور الطالب وأنا أكثر غيبة، هذا الأمر ما عاد فيه. إذا الطالب تغيب 5 أيام بدون عذر والمدرسة مش قادرة تتواصل مع ولي الأمر وما في رد، يدخل عن التدخل المجتمعي. هذه شرطة مجتمعية تتواصل مع ولي الأمر، لأن إحنا نؤمن أن من حق الطالب أنه يدرس من الصف الأول للصف الثاني عشر. هذا صار تعليم إلزامي. حتى السياسة كانت قبل الصف التاسع، الحين لين الصف الثاني عشر. الحين نركز أكثر على الطفولة المبكرة اللي هو من 0 to 4. إحنا نؤمن أن الطالب ضاع حقه أنه يتعلم من 0 to 4. نعتبر أنه مجرد بيبي صغير ويلا ألعاب. لا، الدول الأخرى شو قاعدة تسوي؟ تستثمر تماما هاي السنوات ال4 ويروح لرياض الأطفال وهو عنده كم المهارة. تشجيع البحوث التربوية مع الجامعات، عندنا منحة بحثية. يعني المجلس الأعلى للتعليم قال أنا أريد أعرف بكل شفافية ليش طلابنا حتى الآن ما وصلوا للأثرج والنظم العيني. أنا أريد أعرف العوامل خلف ذلك. هل هذا الأمر منوط فقط بإدارة تطبيق الاختبارات الوطنية والدولية أو الجهات التعليمية؟ لا، إحنا لازم نشغل الجامعات. فعطينا لهم بروبوزل إن إحنا نحتاج منكم تبحثون في هذه المنحة. تقدم لنا 19 بروبوزل، وهذه البروبوزلات بتبحث تعطينا النتائج وتقيم في ديسمبر. كذلك تطوير منظومة الاختبارات الوطنية. نذكر هني أن مش لازم بس نعتمد على الاختبارات الدولية، لازم يكون في كل دولة منظومة اختبارات وطنية تقيم مهارات القرن ال21 وتأهل الطلاب سواء للتحصيل في الاختبارات الدولية أو حتى في تحقيق أساليب التعليم. هذه يعني عجالة بعض الاختبارات اللي تغيرت بناء على التقييمات الدولية. وأخيرا نقول لحضراتكم أن دولة الإمارات يعني تلتفت باهتمام شديد لنتائج التقييمات الدولية ونتائج التقييمات الوطنية، وصناع القرار يلتقون كل شهرين عشان متابعة المؤشرات ويتخذون قرارات وتعديل. وأيضا على ضوء التقييمات الدولية والوطنية تم استحداث برنامج رخصة المعلم والقيادات. نحن مؤمنين إذا ما كان المعلم من أساسه قوي حتى لو حدثت منهج، حتى لو حطيت ريسورس، ما راح يكون له فائدة. تم إنشاء هيئة اسمها هيئة جودة التعليم، ستكون معنية بشيء اللي هو التقييمات الدولية والوطنية، بالإضافة إلى ذلك اللي هو تقييم المدارس. تكون هيئة خارجية بحيث أنها تقيم الوضع وتحدد التوجهات العامة. في العروض الأخرى بنتكلم أكثر عن هذه الأمور. شكرا لكم.
And our next presenter from Qatar.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. معكم شيخ الأصحاب في دولة قطر، استشاري تقييم الطلبة ومسؤول عن الاختبارات الدولية في إدارة تقييم الطلبة بالطقس والتقييم وزارة التعليم والتعليم والتعاون. بالنسبة لمشاركة دولة قطر بالاختبارات الدولية، المشاركة الأساسية كانت في قياس ومنظومة التعليم بشكل عام في دولة قطر كبداية. طبعا احنا حاليا المشاركة مستمرة طبعا هذه الإصلاحات في السياسات التعليمية وعلى مستوى المدارس كذلك، لين نوصل لمستوى ان تكون الاختبارات الدولية أداة ان تبين لنا ان احنا ماشيين على الطريق الصحيح في تطوير التعليم والسياسات التعليمية في الدولة. طبعا مثل ما تشوفون ان الاصلاح والتطوير مستوى الدوله مطلوب طبعا بلا شك لضمان مواكبه التطوير في التعليم على المستوى الاقليمي والدولي. التعليم والمناهج والمعايير بشكل عام تكون نوعا ما ثابته المعايير، يتم تحسينها وتطويرها، لكن في اضافات تدخل عليها اللي هي مهارات القرن العشرين اللي تدخل على المناهج وللطلبه، وغير التعليم اللي هو الالكتروني اللي هو مستحدث والكثير من الدول للحين طبعا ما دخلت في هالمجال، ونامل ان احنا نكون من الدول المواكبه في هالمجال. ايضا التحسين والاصلاح على مستوى المدرسه جزء لا يتجزا من اصلاح ليش على مستوى المدرسه يعني السياسات التعليميه مستوى التعليم. احنا ساعدتنا طبعا التوجه في آلية التحليل. احنا قبل نحلل على نقاط اساسيه ورئيسيه عامه، لكن بالاي في 2019 ارسلت اكسل شيت في اللي هو اسئله الاختبار، وطلبت من المختصين عندنا في الدول ان ايش احنا نبين بكل سؤال المعايير هذه هل تغطى في المناهج الوطنيه عندنا او لا. هذه كانت نقطه جدا اساسيه ومحور اساسي في تغيير النظره للتحليل البيانات الاختبارات الدوليه، لان تبين عندنا ان في معايير معينه اصلا لا تغطى نهائيا فيها في المناهج، بعضها تغطى في صفوف اعلى، بعضها تغطى بمستوى اقل من 12% 45% مش كامل التغطيه، فكان هاي بعد له اثر في نتائج الطلبه في الاختبارات الدوليه. ايضا بيزا 2022 ارسلوا ملفات اساس ان ندرس تغطيه المهارات والمعايير في المناهج الوطنية، وهي بعد ساعدنا ورفعت طبعا كلها تقارير للمختصين ومتخذين القرار في الدولة. طبعا احنا الاستفاده من التقارير الدوليه والوطنيه انها تترقب، طبعا احنا مراكز البحوث الدول كلها تترقب اللي هو التقارير الدوليه على اساسها طبعا وبيانات الدوله على اساسنا نصدر التقارير الوطنيه وترفع التوصيات للمختصين في الدوله لاتخاذ القرارات الصحيحه في مجال الاصلاح والتطوير. الاجراءات اللي تمت طبعا عندنا احنا في اصلاح المنظومه وعلى مستوى الدوله، التعليم عندنا طبعا تعاملنا مع شركتين اللي هما كامبريدج وماكنزي يساعدونا في اصلاح منظومه التعليم بشكل عام. طبعا هم دخول الشركات هذه ما يعني الغاء ما هو موجود، وجود الشركات هذه تحسين وتطوير وتحديث واضافه على ما هو موجود اساسا، طبعا بالاستعانه بالخبرات الوطنيه اللي موجوده. يعني هم ينقلون لنا اشياء يمكن ما تناسب الدوله انها تطبق عندنا، مثل ما تفضلت كريستي قالت انه مو كل شيء طبعا يناسب، احنا نشوف ما هو يناسبنا بنفس الوقت يواكب التعليم المتطور في دول العالم. اساليب المحور الاول مثل ما قلنا دراسه تحليل محتوى المناهج الوطنيه بالقراءه والعلوم والرياضيات، مدى التكافؤ بالمحتوى المناهج من ناحيه، واختبارات التقييم الدوليه من ناحيه اخرى. الثاني تطوير وتحسين اساليب التقييم وطرح الاسئله. طبعا ممكن احنا نطور المناهج هذه، لكن طرح الاسئله في الاغلب يكون متعودين على الطلبه اللي هو الاجابه المباشره، لكن اسلوب الطرح في الاختبارات الدوليه مختلف تماما، ويروح يشكل صدمه للطلبه في ممكن فاهم الكونسبت من السؤال بس مو عارف يجاوب عليه لانه مو قادر يفهم شو اللي مطلوب من السؤال. طبعا هالمشكله صارت اكبر لما انتقل الى النظام الرقمي. النظام الرقمي مختلف تماما حتى عن الاسلوب العادي اللي هو الدروب دراج والمالتيبل تشويس العادي، لان في انظمه ثانيه تفاعليه في الاختبارات هذه الطلبه مش متعرضين لها سابقا في الاختبارات الوطنيه. وعندنا طبعا تكييف وتدريب الطلبه على القراءه واستيعاب المعلومات اللي يقراها والتعبير عما قرأ وشاهد وسمع. القراءه مهمه جدا، احنا الطلبه عندنا طبعا اللي متعودين على اللغه العاميه، اللغه الفصحى صعبه بالنسبه لهم في فهم الاسئله، فما بالك اذا اصلا القراءه عندنا نوعا ما المستوى متدني، فحتى فهم السؤال وقراءته يشكل بعد خلل بالنسبه للطلبه للاجابه. مثل ما قلنا احنا تعاقدنا مع شركات عالميه خاصه تطوير وتنقيح المناهج، وذلك بتوجيه مؤمن اعتماد الخبراء والمختصين في الدوله، وتاكيد الحصول على مناهج وطنيه بمعايير دوليه. ثبات المناهج الدراسيه مهم جدا، وهي مشكله احنا طبعا واجهتنا فتره من الزمن ان تغيير المناهج هي بروح ياثر على المعلمين وعلى الطلبه في التعليم. الاستعانه والتعاقد مع الشركات المختصه لتطوير سياسه منظومه التقييم. المبادرة هذه احنا ماشيين فيها وتم طرح مناقصة للشركات، بس للحين ما اعتمدت الشركة اللي بتساعدنا ان شاء الله، ونقل الاختبارات من ورقية إلى إلكترونية. وطرح عدة مبادرات وبرامج على مستوى المدرسة والصف ودولة تشجيع وتحفيز الطلبة والمجتمع على القراءة، طبعا هاي على مستوى الوزارة بشكل عام للدولة في جميع. نشكر لكم.
Thank you very much. We're a little bit pressed with time, so because we have a very important match coming up, which we of course are very curious about. We're bringing our colleague from Sweden in to go into the next presentation. It's a small shift in the agenda. It's actually already part of the following session, but we had reserved her time. She's been very generous in the preparation of her presentation.
يعني بسيط بالجدول، يعني جبنا فكرة التسويق لأنه صعب إن إحنا يعني نتأخر شوية في الإخبار أو كذا. فجدولنا سيستم الموضوع برزنتيشن الطارق سيكون لنا ترجع مع برزنتيشن في جزء الأخبار، لكن سنستمر بعد المباراة إن شاء الله في هذا الامتحانين بالاختصار، وحنستمر بنفس جدولنا بعد المباراة الساعة 9 الغداء موجود، الشاشات أيضا موجودة متاحة في جميع المزارات. بعد الساعة 3 نلتقي هنا مرة ثانية. نعم ساعة ونص. والتعليم الذي تم هو تعليم أخذنا البرزنتيشن وأيضا بعض النقاشات، ومع هذا نطمح أنه غدا بعد غدا يكون نقاشات أوسع وأعمق واليوم يعني إضافة رائعة. تعلم من بعض تعلم الإجراء، ودائما في مكتب التربية العربي والخليج نحرص على موضوع التعلم لأنه مهم جدا. هناك كثير من القضايا في دولنا عندما نلتقي نتحدث حول هذا التقييم نستفيد من تجربة الصحة والتعليمات، ربما أيضا نظهر أيضا بعض أعمالنا. وأنا أيضا أتمنى من الأخوة أيضا في الهيئة التربية والتعليم والتدريب أن يشاركونا أيضا بداخلتهم، لأنه ما عملنا مشكلة دولة موجود معنا وزارة التعليم السعودية، لكن أيضا بالنسبة لنا مهم جدا لأنهم أيضا يمثلوا هيئة مستقلة تتكلم أيضا كلمات جزء. فما صحنا ونص.
Okay, maybe can you hear us? Yeah.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Maria, we would have to press on the slides from yours and from our ends, but please start with your presentation and thank you again for joining.
I hear you a little bit not so well, but you said that you will change my slides, right? I will tell you what to.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Or should I try to share mine?
No, it's fine, but we'll do it from this side. I think it's a little bit easier. We had some technical problems, but please start. Thank you. Oh, you can now actually do it. Sorry, it's been resolved. Sorry. So you should be able to press on. Yes. Oh, you see. Now you see it, Maria.
Sorry, I seem to hear you a little bit poorly, but can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I kind of understood that you will continue for like 15 more minutes before you have your break. Okay. Poor guys, you have been sitting there for a long time now, right? So I will try to make this in a smooth way and hopefully give you some input for your further discussion. Maria Axelsson from the Swedish National Agency for Education, which is a central school agency in Sweden beneath the Ministry of Education. And I would like to show you in a brief way now what we do with international studies and how we try to use them to improve students' achievements in a short sentence. And you can see here all the studies that we participate in, both the OECD studies, PISA and TALIS, but also many of the IA studies. And these are showing the trend measurement, but we actually have been participating in international studies since the 60s, since one Swedish researcher was the one who founded IA, the Association of International Team. And you might wonder why we participate in so many of the international studies. But actually, we do have them as it's within our evaluation system. So we use them really hard to evaluate our school system. And of course, the second point here, to follow achievement over time, is perhaps the most important thing for us to see the trend, because we don't have any national measurement for trends. We have national assessments, but those are supposed to have teachers in grading the students. So the international studies is actually the only measurement we have over time. And of course, we compare with other school systems. I was listening to your previous session, and we do try to compare with the countries we are close to, like the Nordic countries. We always show the results for Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, for instance, because we are more alike. So it's more useful for us when interpreting the results.
And of course, we participate in those studies to get a lot of data, to try to develop the school system and increase students' knowledge. And here is a picture of some of the trends from 4 of the studies. And I'm showing you this just to make you see that the pattern is kind of the same. Well, ICCS, the citizenship study, is only 2 measure points. But you can see that we had this declining results for many cycles in all of the studies, actually, ICCS. And you listen to the PISA shot from Wales. We suppose we have the same because we saw such a declining results over and over again, and we were really worried, of course, and the policymakers were really worried what is happening in the Swedish school. Why is the results getting worse? And a lot of efforts, of course, has been done, and we reached the bottom, hopefully, in 2012, and have seen actually an increase in the achievement results in the studies from 2015 in PISA teams and 2016 in PERS. And as you see, ICCS is showing increasing numbers in 2016. We have to wait and see what happened next, of course, but this is some. We wanted it to look like a smiling face, a smiling mouth. So when we receive the data from IEA and OECD, since I work at the unit conducting all the studies, we write the reports and we do the analysis. But we have only a couple of months when we have received the data from OECD to make a national report, which we always do. We do a national report that we publish at the same time as the international report is published. So we have not much time to do secondary analysis, but we always try to report some data that we know the policymakers are interested in, that we know will be interested in focusing on how to change the school system or how to improve results in the future. So we have always divided the results on 3 student groups: gender, student with different migration backgrounds, and student with different socioeconomic background. And just want to show you short, because those presentations of the results in a different way might give you some insight in how to work to improve students' outcome. And this is in Swedish, but this is result in reading for boys and girls, you can see, and it's from PISA. And the yellow line is showing the achievement for girls. The purple is for the average for all students, and the orange is for the boys. So this is not unique for Sweden, of course. We can see in many countries that girls overperform boys in reading. But still, that's something to work with. And I just wanted to say that from 29, the PISA 2009, the results went down more for boys until 2012. If you see that the drop was higher for the boys. But then when we recovered a bit in 2015, it was actually the boys who stood for the recovery compared to the girls. And we do hope that this has to do with all the efforts we put into helping boys in reading, just to give you an example. But still there is issues on this, of course. The pattern is not the same in math and science, because we don't have the gender differences in those subjects in the same sense. And here is the results divided for different migration backgrounds, and the top line is showing the results for students born in Sweden with Swedish parents, so that is students with Swedish background, and they are performed very close to the average of all students, which is the purple line, because they are the largest group of the population, of course, around 80%. But then you can see in the yellow line is students that are born in Sweden, but the parents are born in another country, so they are the parents immigrated to Sweden. And the orange line is students that are born in another country with parents born in another country. And you can see, of course, here it's very obvious, even though the foreign student groups are small, but you can see a big difference. So this has also been some really hard work on how to include and get all students in Sweden, even the students not born in Sweden, to get the knowledge they deserve and to be able to manage within the educational system. And finally, we also always show the results divided on socioeconomic background. And the yellow line is the students with the highest socioeconomic background and the performance in reading. And the purple is the average for all students, as you might guess. And the orange is the students with the lowest socioeconomic background. And this is something really troubling to us because we can see that it really matters, even control for migration background and gender. You can see that we do have some issues. It's important what your parents' background are and how to succeed in Swedish schools. So this is really an inequality issue for us, which we currently haven't solved yet. So this is something just to show you what we try to get out of the data when we publish it. And some highlights from PISA over the years. Of course, the inequality issues, also mentioned in Wade's presentation, that we seem to have, we have seen when we increased the results in 2015 in TIMSS and PISA, we can see that the high achievers actually are getting better. But the low performers are still a large group. They are not performing better. So apparently we are good in helping the already good students, but we still lack in the low performers. So this is an inequality issue that we highlight and that we are supposed to do something about. And also, of course, highlights in the declining achievements, hopefully ended in 2012. And the differences in student groups, as I showed you, gender, migration, and social economic. And lately, and also this was mentioned by the Welsh colleague, that we have seen some really hard views on student well-being. Actually, when we saw that our achievement went up, the students started to feel worse. I'm not sure it's a causal effect, but something has to be done. We have students feeling really stressed and depressed, staying home from school more and more. So this is something that actually the Ministry of Education has assigned us just a week ago or so that we need to work on. And as I told you, we don't have time to do analysis, in-depth studies or secondary analysis when we are supposed to publish the results for the first time, but we try to do that afterward. We are working with researchers during the whole PISA cycle, of course, and we give them some fund to do research on their own, but the national agency also tried to conduct some secondary analysis, and we always do these validation studies. Try to, if the public or policymakers ask why are we participating in PISA, we need to say that PISA is actually measuring something that we also have within our school system, or what we want our kids to learn. And so far so good, we have seen that this is quite a match. I mean, the school system is supposed to teach a lot more than the PISA is able to measure, but still what's measured within PISA and TIMSS actually a part of our curriculum or school system. So we do those analyses. We also do some analysis on student responses to better understand the results, both from questionnaires, how the students motivated they are in the subjects, or how they sense of belonging, etc., compared to the results, but also from test items, because teachers are really interested in learning what is students doing wrong. And that's a kind of tricky research to do, or analysis, but actually we do have some success in those studies where teachers have, what is the problem with algebra? And you can look at the students answering things wrong and then try to help them getting it right within the school, in the classroom. And lately we have been able to do coherent studies on the results of the international studies with the national assessment. So we have collected the participating students' security ID number, and then that made us that made it possible for us to add register data from our national systems, like the grades they had on their national assessments and their final grades. And so we can see how good coherence it is between PISA results and the national results, which we believe is really interesting. And we can see it's not a perfect match because they measure different things, but we can see that the students in Sweden getting the highest grade, it's A, they also perform on the highest level of PISA, and students with B, they perform the second highest of PISA, so we can see it's a really nice match, which also is a kind of validation study to say that we do really see that the results here are for real and we can use them in a good sense. And does this have any effect on Swedish school system or actually the student outcome? Can we see an improved results due to the international studies? I mean, you can see that we had this trend break, hopefully, in 2015, but has to do with the thing that we have gone through, being in the international studies. Well, it's hard to say because it's hard to evaluate different reforms using international studies, but we can say that when we saw the declining results, a lot of effort were put in more math instruction hours were a response for previous studies results. We have seen many changes in the curriculum, in syllabuses, especially when we look at IA studies, which is more connected to the curriculum. And we have seen changes in teacher profession, because in TALIS, we have seen that teachers are really burdened with administrative tasks. And then we had an assignment from the Ministry of Education that we are supposed to lower that burden. So it's been reforms on different areas. And we have had a lot of efforts or initiatives for different professional developments for teachers and principals that the agency that I work with are responsible for getting out there to schools. And I will show you one example. And as I told you, we just recently received an assignment to the agency. We were supposed to support schools on students' well-being. So a lot of things have been affected, and we do think that together this should have made the outcome for students or the student outcome better. And just to show you this example of the professional development that we really do believe has made a difference. Not only the agency working with this development, but also the teachers and principals. And we can also see some effects in the results. So it's called the boost for mathematics, or the boost for reading and boost for science. So it was 3 different professional developments initiated after the declining results in TIMSS 2007 and PISA 2009, for instance. So it's a professional development program that reached out to all teachers in Sweden. We're not a very, very big country, but many teachers. So they were offered this. The national agency were having a training where we invited principals and assigned tutors at the schools. They were supposed to be the ones who brought the program back to schools where they're supposed to work with. And all the materials are web resourced. You can find them at the learning portal via the national agency website. And at the time when we initiated this professional development, you can also apply for grants, so you can get some funds into this work at the school level. And the difference between this and other professional developments that we have had in the past is that this is not supposed to be you go for a conference for a day, learn something, get some input, and then go back, and then you forget it after a week. This was supposed to be something that you can continue work with, and it's supposed to be for the whole schools. So the model is very simple. You're supposed to work on your own with the material, and then you will go to your colleagues and you will discuss what to do. You go to the classroom, you try out the things that you discussed with your colleagues, and then you go back to your colleagues and follow up, and perhaps go back to the classroom again and try to do it again or develop it in some way. So it's a simple model, but it's really been something new in one way for us teaching and helping schools improving the instruction and also the students' knowledge. So we have had many evaluations of these boosts, and we have seen that it has actually improved the teaching of teachers, and we have seen some positive effects on student performance. It's not connected to the PISA or TIMSS actually, but we can see that it's increasing, so it might have something to do with that. But we have also evaluations of the math boost that's showing that students are actually getting better. Apparently, we still have a problem with the low performer. So this seems to be an issue for Sweden, that we cannot bring our low performers up. But they're not negatively affected, as the evaluator concluded, so that's good. And we have seen that teachers and principals feel inspired. It's given them a new way to work together with colleagues. We were very individual before, but now they are working more as colleagues, trying to improve the teaching. And we know that the material, the resources for this is free, and it's available on the web, and it's in different modules. So if you're a teacher wanting to improve your teaching in like algebra, you go to the algebra module and you bring the resource and you work together, and hopefully everyone is happy and pleased and know more about algebra. So and we can see that it's used because we can see when teachers download the material from our website. But even though they're not being paid any money or grants. So I think I am done with my presentation, and I'm sorry if I talk too quick because I know you will have your break now. And I hope I gave you some input for your further discussions.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll take it forward after watching the Saudi Arabia-Argentina match. Thank you very much for your time and your inputs, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
To give a quick recap of what this presentation would be about. So this session is the first of our thematic sessions. We will be delving deeper into one of the themes that we've been exploring in this conference, which is that of student outcomes. So Tarek will start by giving an in-depth analysis of the data on student outcomes. This will be followed by Abak's case study presentations, which we did not get to earlier. And then afterwards, we will try to moderate a discussion between the participants on your priorities with regards to student outcomes, how you've been using the data, how you've been complementing international sources of data. So this is a bit the structure of the session. So we hopefully resolve the technical issue and get going really quickly. Mabruk also.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I am Talib Mustafa. I'm Associate Professor in Education and Public Policy at the University of Birmingham. And before that, I was a policy analyst at OECD's PISA for 5 years. So in this presentation, okay. Yeah, so in this presentation, we are going to cover some of the issues that we have been discussing over the last few presentations. So first, we have all seen the average. We have been talking about the average performance and about the rankings of APEX countries. And I mean, as you know, I mean, the average obviously is a good measure, but it has many things that are worth analyzing or looking at in depth. So we have a couple of things that I would like to cover. First, starting with proficiency levels. Mentioned a little bit, I mean, discussed it a little bit. Then we have the trends over time and performance by subdomains, and finally, best analysis, which usually doesn't get enough coverage in the mainstream research. Okay, so I'll start with a general graph on presenting on so the average performance of APEX countries, and we have participants that have participated in PISA 2018, and you have at the bottom, so you have performance on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis you have the variability in performance. And you see that. So UAE and Qatar, they tend to have they are below the average performance, but they are more valuable. Saudi Arabia is on the other side. So this is, I mean, this is something that you already know about the averages, but what we would like to see first, I mean, let's start with performance and the proficiency in reading. So here we have different levels of proficiency, and as you know in PISA, level 2 represents the base level of proficiency that all students should attain in order to be able to perform basic tasks in their daily lives. So anything below level 2 is considered low achievers. And you see in general, most the 3 APEX countries, they have a higher proportion of low achievers and somewhat low proportion of high and low achievers. So, yeah, I mean, you see, so we have Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the same in mathematics. So, I mean, this is something that is important to mention. However, it's not the full story, because I mean, most countries that have joined this, especially developing countries, have started with a low average, and also over time they progress. So we see, for example, for instance, Turkey. So Turkey was, like I said, the lowest ranking country in PISA when it joined, and progressively started improving over time. And the number of low achievers have reduced. So you can see that the rise in the average was happened because they managed to improve the performance of their low achievers. And at the same time, they increased the age of compulsory education from 15 to 18. So here you see some trends, and you can see that, for instance, Qatar managed to reduce the proportion of low achieving students between 2009 and 2018, which is actually quite a good development. So we sometimes we overly focus on the average and forget the bigger picture. But here it says, I mean, what's the order is important over time. So what happens and how that is done in terms of policy. Here is the proportion of top achievers. So it has been stable over. We have only Qatar, Qatar is only participated in both surveys, but hopefully with time we have more cycles, so you'll be able to track the performance of students. Another close. Okay, yeah. Okay. So another thing to look at is performance on subdomains in each of the subjects that PISA assesses. So in reading, we do have reading process, so reading process subdomains such as locating information, so the ability to locate information in text, understanding, and then evaluating and reflecting on the information they have read. And you can see that, for instance, in the UAE, students do better. So here we have average scores. So they do better on evaluation and reflecting than locating information and understanding. And this would give us a certain idea about areas of strength, and this might be related to some practices that happen at school or in the classroom that teachers might, the curriculum, this aspect of literacy might be more prominent. Or that they focus on like the practical classroom work and so on, they might focus on those things more than, for instance, locating information. The same for, so this is science. We have 3 science subscales explaining phenomena scientifically, evaluating and designing scientific inquiry, and interpreting data and evidence scientifically. And in both UAE and Qatar, we see that students are more capable of interpreting data and evidence scientifically rather than than the middle one, so evaluating and designing scientific inquiry. So it could be, so they are stronger on the theory aspects more than the practical aspects of teaching science. So here is another, so I mean this is something that we will cover tomorrow as well when we discuss education policy, so what happens at school and so on. So this is a measure of resilience. It's another way of looking at performance. It's looking at the percentage of students who come from disadvantaged families and then they achieve in the top quarter of performance in the PISA. So this is the reading scale. So in the APEX, the 3 APEX countries who have about 10%, and in Saudi Arabia it's very close to the OECD average, so it's almost the same as the average, which means like there are 10% of students who come from disadvantaged families who end up achieving the top 25% reading, which is so now we will move on to something that has been a way of analyzing PISA data, which is focuses on individual items from the PISA test. So this item analysis. So as you know, in the PISA test there are test units, and in each test unit there are test questions. So in reading there are, I think, more about 100 test items. So these are test questions that the students have to answer, and each question covers a certain area or a cognitive process. So they cover reading, math, and science. You have multiple units, and the answers can be true, false, or partial scores. So each item is characterized by a content domain. So for science, it could be physics, living organisms, so biology, space, and terrestrial systems. It covers cognitive domains, which I've already mentioned, so explanation of scientific phenomena, interpretation of scientific evidence, and evaluation and design of scientific experiments. The format of the questions could be either multiple choice or open-ended questions. And questions obviously can vary in difficulty from very easy questions, so level 1, up to level 6, which are the very difficult questions. And the mode of delivery, so depending on the country, could be either paper or computer-based. So you can see that each item has its own characteristics. And when we look at those items and see how students performed on those items, we can tell a more refined story than when looking at the average performance. And this is, I mean, we could characterize in this way the performance of each of the categories. So, I mean, how does item level analysis works. It works by comparing the performance of students in a particular country, let's say Saudi Arabia, and we can compare it to other countries. So now the choice of those countries depends on what you are planning on doing. So you can compare, for instance, Saudi Arabia is reading to other Arabic-speaking countries. It could be all other APEC countries or other participating countries like Jordan or Morocco. So I mean, you can do whatever, I mean, whichever comparison that you think is important. You could compare Saudi Arabia to other countries with similar economic development or similar level of GDP per capita or whichever criteria you choose, or to countries that you can be inspired by, or that you think that their educational policy might be comparable or useful to your country. So now I'll give you, I mean, this item analysis has been used in a few reports that are published by the OECD. None of those were like the mainstream PISA reports, so they were like published separately. One of those is a report published for the United States in 2013, and yeah, so before getting to this, I'll just tell you how the item analysis works. So basically, you take the performance of students on each item and compare it with the average of the countries you have chosen. So let's say that you are taking the United States, like test item number 1, 45% of students got it right, so they have correct answers. And you compare that with the average of the OECD or a group of countries, which might be, let's say, 55, so it's much higher. And you see that this difference is big enough. So that would tell you that for some reason, those students in the US did not do as well as students internationally. And then you look at the characteristics of those items and know why and which area is an area of strength or weakness. So here is the report that was published in 2013, and you can see that the United States is being compared first to the OECD average and to the other 5 countries, so Canada, Germany, Netherlands, Korea, and China. So you can see there is a mix of countries. So you have Canada English speaking, very close to the US, but you have also East Asian countries and countries in Europe that are doing well in general on the test. So, so these are individual test items, and you could have a couple of hundred of them. So what is done in this analysis, you would take correct the response rate on each item, so the proportion of students who got it right in the USA, and then in the, let's say, at the OECD level or for each of the countries, comparative countries. Then you do a logic transformation, which I mean is a technical thing to do, but it gives you those scores, and then you compare them. So what you see here is the difference, and those differences are relatively big. And what this shows is that those test items represent areas of strength for the United States, because their students are doing particularly and unexpectedly well on those items in comparison with other OECD countries. And you can see which domain they represent. So this is about interpretation, this is about formulating hypotheses, and this is about deploying knowledge. Now it's the other way around. So here you see all the numbers are negative, the difference, which means that the United States is scoring below on those items. And these are areas of weakness. Now let's represent this on a figure. So these are the items representing areas of strength. And you can see where the items fall. So we have 3 items under uncertainty and data and under employing knowledge, and 3 items under uncertainty and data and interpretation. And in the ones in the middle, you can see it's zero items. So what that shows is that students in the US are particularly good with items that deal with uncertainty and data. While you don't have any items in the middle representing strength. So these are areas that possibly are not well covered in the curriculum or that students are not familiar with. They were not highly able to. So now areas of weakness, you could see, I mean, the biggest bubble in the middle, where the five items representing space and shape and formulating hypotheses. So obviously, this area represents weakness for students in the US. So, I mean, this is a way of, if you want to do some refined research with test items from PISA rather than looking only at the average. And it's one of the ways we can use it. Now, to move on a little bit, another way also of analyzing performance in PISA is by using national data or things that are relevant to the context of your education system and see how it matches against the PISA data. So here are some findings from a PISA report from Abu Dhabi, where they did some more in-depth analysis using data for Abu Dhabi. So they looked at dimensions of equity, at geographical regions. So this is something that's very specific to each country. So if you want to look at the performance of regions within the country, then that's also possible to do in PISA. And then they also looked at schooling environments such as performance of public and private schools. So here is the performance of schools in different regions or in the Emirates, and you see it's broken down by private and public. And for instance, you see that, for instance, performance in private schools is always much higher than the OECD average. So when comparing actually to the OECD average, it's not, I mean, the performance is not homogeneous across all sectors in a country. So obviously, private schools in the UAE are doing quite well. So the challenge tends to be the public schools. And this is a way of, let's say, pinpointing where the areas where policies could be more effective. Because obviously private schools is not a source of, I mean, you shouldn't be really worried about them because they are doing well anyway. And the same, I mean, when you look at proficiency levels by those categories, so private, you see that they have more of the top categories of performance, and the opposite for the public schools. So, and this is a share of top performance. You also have more top performance in private schools than in public schools. Trends in performance over the last few years, we could see that, for instance, Dubai private schools are doing better and they are improving over time. They are, I mean, above the average. So in the last couple of cycles. While for the other types of schools, it's either like stable or kind of declined a little bit and went up and so on. Also, another thing that we can think about is issues of equity. So when looking at performance, obviously the average will hide the bigger story. So what is important to look at is how those performances are distributed. So you can look at public-private schools, you can look at socioeconomic status and how, let's say, the children from the most disadvantaged families are doing. And you could look at, obviously, by gender, by so many other dimensions. So I think, so we do have some questions for the discussion. And I'm happy to take answer your questions. Thank you.
So we will now move on to the Arabic case studies. So we have Kuwait, Oman, and Bahrain. Maybe we can start with Kuwait. Or and Yemen.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تحية للحضور الكريم ولكل القائمين على إعداد هذه الورشة، وشكرا لكل من شارك في هذا العمل المتميز. نجتمع اليوم في هذا السطح التعليمي من أجل أن نناقش معا هذه الجلسة حول التقييمات الدولية. خطة تنمية الكويت تحدد رؤية الكويت لعام 2035 وتركز على 7 ركائز، وهي مجالات تركيز الخطة من أجل الاستثمار فيها وتطويرها. و7 ركائز من ضمنها هي رأس مال بشري إبداعي تهدف إلى إصلاح نظام التعليم في الكويت والإعداد الشباب بصورة أفضل ليصبحوا أعضاء يتمتعون بقدرات تنافسية من أجل إنتاجية ولقوة العمل الوطنية. أولى هذه البرامج هي عندنا المشروعات المتعلقة بالدراسات المحلية والدولية لقياس وتقييم نظام التعليم في دولة الكويت. ومن ضمن هذه المشاريع هو التقييمات الدولية ووضع الخطط من أجل الإصلاح والتطوير في التعليم. سوف أبدأ بكلمة لوالدي صاحب السمو الشيخ نواف أحمد الجابر الصباح حفظه الله ورعاه. قال أن التعاون بين المؤسسات الدولة هو الأساس لأي عمل وطني ناجح والأسلوب الأمثل نحو النجاح. نبدأ الآن بتضافر جميع الجهود من أجل إنجاح هذا العمل والوصول إلى النجاح والتحسن في جودة التعليم. تضافر جهود وزارة التربية وبالتعاون مع المركز الوطني، وهو مركز وطني لتطوير التعليم ويساند وزارة التربية من أجل التقييمات الدولية، بالإضافة إلى قطاع المنشآت التربوي والتخطيط الذي يزودنا بالبيانات والإحصائيات. كل هذه التضافر وكل هذه الجهود تتضافر من أجل وضع الخطط لتحسين وتجويد التعليم في الكويت. أيضاً دراسة وتحليل نتائج التقييمات الدولية التي تم تحقيقها ومقارنتها بالسنوات السابقة. نجد أن هناك تحسين بسيط، ولكن هذا التحسن نتيجة لوضع الخطط هذه وتنفيذها نجد أن هذا التحسن هو أننا نسير في المسار الصحيح في هذه الخطط التنموية. وضع الخطط المناسبة وتحديد الأهداف التنموية وتحديد أولويات بين الأهداف المحددة وترجمتها إلى إجراءات وبرامج ومبادرات، وتنفيذ هذه الخطط أيضاً بالإجراءات التصحيحية من النواحي الفنية والنواحي الإدارية. طبعاً النواحي الفنية تتعلق بترجمة هذه الأسئلة والأسئلة المتعلقة في التقييمات الدولية، إضافة إلى اجتماعات خارج وداخل دولة الكويت ومتابعة الطلبة وتتبع أدائهم وتصحيح الاختبارات وإجراء الاختبارات التجريبية في التقييمات الدولية، وأيضاً من الناحية الإدارية ومتابعة تنفيذها من قبل المختصين فنيين وإداريين في وزارة التربية وسعي المؤسسة التعليمية في دولة الكويت نحو تطوير المنظومة التعليمية. هناك عدة مشاريع خطة إنمائية، ولن يحدث النجاح في هذه التقييمات الدولية لجهود الطالب فقط، إنما هناك مشاريع تدعم هذا الطالب من أجل الوصول إلى النجاح. هذا التحسن اللي حدث في دولة الكويت في السنة الأولى له في أو السنة السابقة له في مشاركته في اختبار تيمز هو وصول هناك ووجود هناك مشاريع تدعم من أجل تحسين وجودة التعليم، مشروع تطوير المناهج الدراسية ودور قطاع البحوث التربوية والمناهج، ومشروع تطوير التجهيزات المدرسية بالتعليم العام والخاص، مشروع تطوير الإدارة المدرسية ومن ضمن الخطط المتعلقة بها وتحقيق التنمية المهنية للعاملين، مشروع وتنويع مسارات التعليم الثانوي، وأيضا التحول الرقمي وهو من أهم المشاريع. من ضمن المشاريع المهمة جدا بالتعاون في السابق مع معهد الكويت للأبحاث العلمية، وأيضا الآن أصبح العمل مع إدارة التخطيط وإدارة نظم المعلومات في وزارة التربية، وهو تطبيق أطلس الوطني للمرافق والخدمات التعليمية بتقنية نظم معلومات GIS. هذا التطبيق يعطي قاعدة من البيانات ويعطي قاعدة من الإحصائيات التي من خلالها نتتبع أداء هؤلاء الطلاب ونحسن من أدائهم. السياسة التعليمية في ضوء التقييمات الدولية في دولة الكويت قامت على قدم وساق من أجل تحسين أداء الطلاب خلال السنة، وأجري في 2018 اختبارات تجريبية للطلبة لقياس أدائهم، ومن خلالها وضعت خطة في تطوير ومواءمة المناهج الوطنية من قبل خبراء مختصين في مجال التعليم بما تتناسب مع اختبارات التقييم. أيضا وضعت هناك خطة ذكية بأنها وضعت هناك كتيبات مساندة للمنهج الأساسي، ووضعت هذه الكتيبات تحت إشراف فني وموجهين فنيين واختصاصيين في هذه المواد العلوم والرياضيات والقراءة أو اللغة العربية لغتين. أيضا هناك في مجال القراءة والعلوم والرياضيات بما يتوافق مع ما تسمح به المنظمة العالمية. إعداد وتنفيذ برامج الإنماء المهني، ونحن نعلم بأن مصنع التعليم أين يقع؟ داخل الفصل، وهذا المصنع يحمل 3 محاور، وهو المعلم والمنهج والطالب. والمعلم إذا قمنا بتأسيسه ووضع التنمية له ورفع من كفاءته ينعكس ذلك على أداء الطالب. ولا ننسى بأن إعداد وتنفيذ برامج الإنماء المهني للمعلمين المشرفين في مركز التطوير في الكويت، التنمية والتطوير في دولة الكويت، ودورات تدريبية مكثفة في القراءة والاستيعاب والفهم وعلى المهارات المرتبطة بالعلوم والرياضيات ومهارات القرن ال21. أيضا تطوير وتحسين أساليب التقييم، وهي من أهم النقاط التي دائما نتطرق لها، أساليب التقييم، وهي تعويد الطلبة على الاختبارات الوطنية في المدارس، ووضعنا ما يسمى باختبارات التحدي، وكان هناك تحدي في الدولة مشركين في ذلك أولياء الأمور. لو نظرنا إلى هذا الطالب بأنه يقوم بحل هذه الاختبارات، وهي الاختبارات التقييمات الدولية بمجهوده، لوجدنا أن الدرجات سوف تكون عادية، ولكن عندما نضع لديه التحدي والتحفيز، وهو من أهم الأمور التي دائما نسعى إليها بالتعاون مع أولياء الأمور ليدعمون هؤلاء الطلاب وأيضا المدارس، ووضعا هذا التحدي بجدية هذه التقييمات الدولية، لأن وجدون الطلاب بأن التقييمات الدولية هي مجرد اختبارات لقياس التقييم، ولكن جديتهم دائما في الاختبارات التحصيل الدراسي. فوضعنا أن هناك اختبار نسميه اختبار التحدي، حملة كبيرة حصلت في دولة الكويت من أجل الاستعداد لاختبار تيمز للترقي إلى مستوى الأسئلة في الاختبارات الدولية. تدريب الطلبة على أسئلة مهارات التفكير العليا، ووضع أن من ضمن تقييم المعلم في الفصل هو أنه يتطرق إلى الأسئلة ذات المستويات العليا، وهي التفكير الإبداعي والتفكير الناقد وأيضا حل المشكلات. وهي من الأسس في أن هذا المعلم عندما يشرح الحصة الدراسية ويضع الأسئلة التي تنتمي إلى المهارات العليا، يضع بحد ذاته أنه عندما يشرح هذه المعرفة وهذه المعلومات يضع في باله أنه يقوم بعرض هذه الأسئلة، ومهمة أن يتطرق لها حتى يرتقي هؤلاء الطلبة إلى مستويات عليا. دمج تكنولوجيا المعلومات والاتصالات في التعليم وتزويد الطلاب بالمعارف والمهارات والرياضيات بما يتناسب مع المعايير الدولية. مهمة جدا التكنولوجيا أيضا في الاختبارات الإلكترونية، وأيضا نحن في عصر المعلومات يجب دمج هذه التكنولوجيا. عمل عدة مبادرات وبرامج تربوية على مستوى دولة الكويت لتطوير وتحسين المنظومة التعليمية. النقاط المهمة التي على أساسها قامت دولة الكويت برفع وتحسين أداء التعلم ونماذج التعلم بالنسبة للطلبة هو وضع الخطط الاستراتيجية، وهذه الخطط الاستراتيجية لا تضع على مستوى وزاري إنما توضع على مستوى المدارس، وهي تكون خطط تشغيلية مبرمجة إلى إجراء أهداف إجرائية ويتم تنفيذها. الهدف الأساسي ليس وضع هذه الخطط، إنما الهدف الأساسي هو تنفيذ هذه الخطط في الطريقة المثلى لنصل إلى الهدف. الاهتمام بتوظيف كوادر من المعلمين والإكفاء ووضع برامج الإنماء المهني، وأيضاً على أيدي خبراء مختصين في التدريب، ونحو تحقيق الاستقرار النفسي والاجتماعي والتربوي لدى المعلمين لضمان الرضا الوظيفي. نهتم أيضاً ليس من الناحية المهنية إنما من الناحية النفسية والاجتماعية لهؤلاء المعلمين، وتوفير الأماكن المناسبة لهم وفقاً لما يريدون. وضع برامج لرعاية وتدريب الطلبة في مختلف المراحل التعليمية على المفاهيم والمعارف والمهارات لرفع من أدائهم، وهذا ما تم في منهج العلوم والرياضيات في رفع أداء الطلبة في هذا الشأن. توجيه وتصميم وتنفيذ وتقييم جميع عناصر المناهج الوطنية في دولة الكويت، وأيضاً نحو تحديد المفاهيم والمهارات والاتجاهات المستهدفة لرفع أداء هؤلاء الطلبة. تطوير أساليب القياس والتقويم كما تطرقنا لها سابقاً، واستخدام التكنولوجيا في ذلك من أجل تحسين جودة التعليم. من أهم الطرق التي دائماً ونجد أن المعلمون الكويت هم أكفاء بهذه الطريقة هو طرق التدريس في تطبيق طرق التدريس، اتساع ومواءمة أساليب واستراتيجيات التعلم، ونجد أن طرق التدريس من أهم الطرق التي من خلالها يتطرق أو يلجأ المعلم من أجل أن يوضح أسئلة المهارات العليا بما يتناسب مع التقييمات الدولية. من ضمن البرامج والمبادرات في رفع أداء الطلاب ونتائج التعلم في دولة الكويت هو وضع خطط التدريب تحت إشراف إدارة التطوير والتنمية بوزارة التربية في دولة الكويت، أيضاً عمل برامج لرعاية الطلبة في جميع مستوياتهم ورفع دافعتهم نحو التعلم وتحقيق جودة التعليم ارتقاء في مصاف الدول المتقدمة. في نهاية تطبيق البرامج الإلكترونية والواقع المهزز في الحصص الدراسية والافتراضي وتقنيات الذكاء الاصطناعي وتفعيل المنصات التعليمية. هناك منصات تعليمية تخدم وزارة التربية إلكترونية، وبهذا نحقق التعلم المدمج الذي من خلاله نرفع من أداء هؤلاء الطلبة وتحسين من أدائهم، وأيضاً لتفعيل المنصات للتعلم المدمج في عبر التطبيقات التقويمية ومهارات العلوم والرياضيات والقراءة لقياس أداء الطلبة فيما يتوافق مع مستوى الأسئلة في الاختبارات الدولية. معكم تهاني الهاجري، موجه فني علوم، باحثة ومخترعة ومدربة. شكراً لكم.
Next, I think on Matt, right? Just to ask you to maybe keep the presentation to 5 minutes maximum, so sorry. Just so we have the time for everyone to go, and we have some time for discussion as well. I will give you a sign if you look at me once you pass the mic.
التخطيط في سلطنة عمان مر بمراحل، بدأ بالخطط الخمسية، عندنا شيء اسمه الخطط الخمسية واستمر حتى الحين وصل الخطة الخمسية العاشرة. عندنا خطط استراتيجية طويلة المدى، استراتيجية أولى واستراتيجية ثانية وبنمشي عليها. وفي عندنا رؤية الخطابات السامية لجلالة السلطان قابوس طيب الله الثرى. طبعا كان لحد 2010 استقت الأولويات التعليم من هذه المصادر. بالنسبة للخطابات طبعا في 2010 لأن كان لتأسيس الدولة، وبدأنا في الخطط التنموية الخمسية، وبدأت في سنة 76 إلى حاليا يعني. وفي استراتيجيتين اللي ذكرناهم. بالنسبة للخطط الخمسية من الأولى إلى الخامسة، هذه ركزت على التوسع في التعليم، في الاعتماد على توطين المعرفة. فنلاحظ أن في الخطة الخمسية الأولى تنمية الموارد البشرية المحلية، تنمية الاقتصاد الوطني، وتوسيع التعليم والتدريب، لأنها تعد من أهم مرتكزات التنمية. في الخطة الخمسية الثانية أيضاً استمر في التدريب المهني، لأنه كان نتاج الخطة الخمسية الثانية. يعني الشيء اللي ما نكمله في الخطة الخمسية الأولى أو نلاحظ عليه تحديات نكمله في الخطة الخمسية اللي بعدها. في الخطة الخمسية الثالثة تحويل معاهد معلمين لتوطين المعرفة، لأن كان في توسيع. الحين احنا نركز على النوع بدل ما كان على الكم، والتدريب المهني، وطبعا في حقول معرفية مختلفة. في الخطة الخمسية الرابعة لاحظت السلطنة أن في اعتماد على الوافدين أو العمالة الوافدة، فكان التركيز من ذاك الوقت لحد حاليا أن كيف نقلل العمالة الوافدة في سلطنة خاصة في التعليم. والتعليم الحمد لله وصلنا يعني بنسبة عالية، ورجعنا مرة ثانية بسبب التقاعدات في الفترة الأخيرة. الاستراتيجيات بدأت أول استراتيجية في سنة 96، وبدأ معها التعليم الأساسي، وهو نظام تعليم يعتمد على الشمولية، أن الطالب وممكن أيضا يساعد في سوق العمل بالنسبة للعمالة الوافدة، فالطالب يخلص الصف العاشر وعلى طول يلتحق بسوق العمل. لكن للأسف أن هذه الشهادة ما تم اعتمادها، وتحول إلى تنوع مسارات في الحقبة الحالية. في رؤية عمان، وهو هذا المهم، احنا مستقبلنا الحين في رؤية عمان لحد 2040، فعندنا توجه استراتيجي من ضمن الرؤية وهو تعليم شامل، أي أن ذوي الإعاقة يأخذوا حقهم، والطفولة المبكرة تأخذ حقها، غير أن التعليم يمتد على جميع المراحل. أن أيضاً تعلم مستدام، وهو يشبه الهدف الرابع من أهداف اليونسكو، الهدف الرابع اليونسكو. والبحث العلمي هذه أيضاً من الأهداف. تم فعلاً تعدد مصادر التمويل للأبحاث والمنح، سواء من الدعم السامي، التعليم العالي والابتكار، وهي وزارة عندنا أيضاً تعطي منح للبحث العلمي، بشرط أن تكون هذه البحوث بحوث استراتيجية وليست بحوث عادية. فكل مرتكزاتها أن يكون نظام تعليمي يتسم بالجودة العالية والشراكة المجتمعية. الشراكة المجتمعية نقصد فيها شراكة القطاع الخاص، أي استثمار التعليم، وهذا المهم في الحقبة الحالية. نظام متكامل مستقبل للحوكمة. احنا ما كان عندنا حوكمة حقيقية، الحين سلطنة عمان أنشأت حوكمة، أقسام للحوكمة في جميع الوزارات وما فيها التعليم. مناهج تعليمية معززة للقيم. بالنسبة لي أيضاً إشراك المجتمع الجودة العالية، أيضاً تنوع المسارات، والمناهج التعليمية أيضاً متنوعة المسارات ومعززة للقيم والهوية. أنا حاولت أختصر، وإن شاء الله الفكرة وضحت بالنسبة لسلطنة عمان. شاكرة استماعكم.
Thank you so much. Bahrain would be next. Oh, sorry. Then Yemen.
العربي تنظيم هذه الورشات التي تتضمن تجسير البيانات والسياسات التعليمية. طبعا الكل يعلم ان اليمن شاركت في 3 دورات بدأت المشاركة لليمن في الدورة الثالثة 2003 تلتها دورة 2007 ثم دورة 2011. نتيجة الظروف التي حصلت في اليمن والحرب توقفت اليمن على المشاركة في الدورات 2015 و2019 و2023 هي الدورة الحالية للدراسة الدولية تمس. طبعا توقف اليمن في عام 2011 كانت في ظروف الحرب، وكذلك بمبادرة أيضا من المنسق الوطني لدراسة تمس أن المستقبل في خطر. نتائج بعد أن قام الفريق الوطني لدراسة تمس في عمل ندوة موسعة على مستوى كل الوطن بأن التعليم في خطر على ضوء نتائج تحصيل تلاميذ الصف الرابع بعلوم الرياضيات لنتائج الدراسة الدولية تمس 2007. بعد ذلك اتجه الفريق الوطني وعمل مبادرة إلى التقييمات الوطنية على ضوء معايير الاختبارات الدولية، وكان من ضمن هذه البرامج هو تحسين مستوى تلاميذنا في القراءة والحساب، حيث تم الإعداد بشكل متقدم لبرنامج نهج القراءة المبكرة للصفوف الأولى من 1 إلى 3 من التعليم الأساسي، وتم تعميم التجربة أيضا على جميع مدارس الجمهورية، والذي حقق مستوى عالي في تحصيل التلاميذ في السنوات الأخيرة هذه في تحصيل التلاميذ للقراءة وفقا لنتائج التقييمات الوطنية التي تمت في عام 2013 وعام 2017. أسباب التوقف عن المشاركة ذكرناها سابقا. اقترح الفريق الوطني لدراسة تمس اتجاه التقييمات الوطنية وعمل برامج من أجل أداء أفضل في تمس 2019 للمتقين. الحرب والأوضاع الحالية التي تمر بها بلادنا، أيضا التمويل هو كان العنصر الأساسي في توقف الدراسات. طبعا السياسة التربوية في الجمهورية اليمنية بعد تدني مستوى تحصيل التلاميذ الصف الرابع استشعر صناع القرار حجم المشكلة بعد نتائج الدورة الرابعة 2007، واتخذت بعض الإجراءات العاجلة لمشاركة اليمن في دورة 2011. مبادرة صفوف الأساس كانت إحدى المبادرات التي كان في الاتفاق ما بين وزارة التربية والتعليم والبرنامج الألماني لتحسين جودة التعليم، وتم تنفيذ الهدف الأول من مدارس العينة بإدخال عدد 68 مدرسة تجريبية مع مدارس تمس. إعداد الكتاب المدرسي والوسائل المساعدة في تنمية مهارة التفكير كان من ضمن هذه المبادرة، وتدريب المعلمين ونقل المعلم مع تلاميذه من الصف الأول خلال الصفوف الثلاثة الأولى من الصف الأول للصف الثاني للصف الثالث، ينتقل مع تلاميذه. حققت هذه التجربة نجاح في أثناء تطبيق الاختبارات الوطنية في عام 2013 والاختبارات الوطنية في عام 2017. أيضا تم تطوير مناهج جميع الصفوف من 1 إلى 3 وفق هذه المبادرة، ومنها نهج القراءة المبكرة الذي هو الآن حاليا يتم تنفيذه على جميع المناطق المحررة مع برنامج الحسابية. أيضا تقييم التقريب الذي حقق نتائج إيجابية وعليه تم تطوير مادة الكتاب ودليل المعلم والوسائل المساعدة في الصفوف الأولية من 1 إلى 4. كان من ضمن تدني مستوى تحصيل التلاميذ في الصف الرابع هو أن الطالب كان لا يستطيع القراءة. وإذا قرأ بعض الأسئلة أيضا لا يفهم ايش لأن أغلب الأسئلة كانت غير مألوفة لدى تلاميذ الصف الرابع في اليمن. بعد ذلك تم الاتجاه إلى نهج القراءة. هذا حقق الآن على أساس أن احنا قمنا بالتقييمات الوطنية قبل أن نقوم بالمشاركة الدولية. نأمل حاليا أن نشارك في الدورة القادمة، الدورة الثامنة 2027 بعد انتهاء الدورة هذه انتهاء العام 2023. هذه بعض النتائج اللي كانت في تمس 2011 و2007. شاركنا بالصف السادس مع الصف الرابع، ومدارس الابتدائية هي مدارس الأساس التي عملنا عليها تجربة. نشوف إنه كان في فروق بسيطة بعد التدخلات قامت بها وزارة التربية والتعليم في تأهيل المعلم وإعداد دليل المعلم وتدريبه بشكل خاص على 68 مدرسة. هذا وشكرا.
Thank you, everyone. We know we're a bit over time, but we wanted to get the chance to have a discussion so that we're not just presenting at you, but we're kind of exchanging amongst ourselves. What are the key takeaways from the presentation that you've heard today? Is there anything that stands out to you? Is there an area where you see you can learn from each other or learn from the OECD? Is there an area where you need particular support? So we would love your input. If you have any short interventions, and of course we'll have the chance to dig deeper into this over the coming 2 days. So I'll give you the floor.
It's my start. First of all, I thank my colleagues and in OECD and my colleagues in ABEX for organizing this sessions. Something we just learned about the visa and how deep the information, how deep knowledge we can get out of that kind of test. So I think as a GCC, as an individual, we need more awareness about this kind of test. We need more materials to discuss the capacity or the benefit of interpretation of involvement in such tests. So we need this kind of knowledge. Can we just ask OECD to provide us with more information, like catalog about the visa? Maybe we can even in ABEX we can translate it and provide it to our colleagues over the GCC, so they can benefit. They can base their decision in participating in this test or teams or pairs based on full knowledge and how they can benefit from such participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to ask. Actually, I'm a little curious about the program that you provide WELS with. She named peer-to-peer support or a program. We need to know more about it. Also, I'm very keen to know about the policies. How can OECD can help us and create a policy for future education? And if this is an area that you discussed before or you presented before, we'll be very happy to have some results soon. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الكلمة العربية. العزيز عضو المنسق الوطني للتعليم الجيد من دولة الكويت. نفس ما تفضل الدكتور محمد، احنا نحتاج الى دليل ارشادي فعلا يوضح لنا البيانات المطلوبة، لكن في اختلاف بالنسبة حق المنظمات اللي تطلب مثلا الاحصائيات او الجهات الخارجية، تختلف طبيعة العمل عن الدول العربية. اوكي، في اللي هو البيان الاحصائي المطلوب، فيا حتى يعني يكون تحديد المطلوب بشكل يعني تفصيلي اكثر، او يكون هناك في ورش تدريبيه خاصه اونلاين حق موظفينا او الشباب. شكرا.
بالنسبة لدولة قطر، الاهتمام اللي حالي لنا بورش خاصة بالتحليل بطريقة أعمق. التحليل العادي العملي عندنا، يعني احنا نحلل العوامل الأكاديمية وغير الأكاديمية، وهاي شيء ما نعرفه. في متطلبات تجينا من قادة ثانية وإدارات تطلب تحليل أعمق من كذي، مش البحثي وأنا أتكلم، التحليل بالنسبة للبيانات والأرقام. وشلون اصلا تصدر الارقام؟ احنا بنفهم مش مجرد نفتح على مستوى الدوله يطلع معدل معين، على مستوى المهارات تطلع معدلات يمكن اعلى من معدل الدوله، طيب شلون يطلع المعدل دي؟ احنا نبي نفهم هذا الكونسيبت. يعني التحليل عندنا نبي ورش خاصه بفرق التحليل، شلون تحلل البيانات وشلون نقدر احنا نحلل مثل ما تفضل البروفيسور طارق على اساس ان على مستوى الايتمز. يعني هاي بالنسبه لنا وايد مهم بعد، ونقطه وايد مهمه بالنسبه حق بيزا. في تيمز بيز يمكن الموضوع ابسط من اسهل ممكن نطلع، لكن في بيزا الموضوع شويه مبهم بالنسبه لنا. شكرا.
Thank you so much for the questions. I'll try to go over them and maybe give also Tarek and Marco the floor. Just in terms of the resources and that we could provide in terms of the PISA analysis of PISA results. So just to give credit where credit is due, Alex has been very instrumental in translating a lot of our publications into Arabic, and these can serve as a lot of important resources for the country. We can help pinpoint some of the resources that are specific to PISA and also with regards to the future of education that could be beneficial for translation. So we will pick up this after the workshop. In terms of raising awareness about international assessments, we are planning to do some more webinars in collaboration with ABEX, so to present the different international assessments, including, for example, the survey of adult skills, which is targeted to the adult working population and not just students in school. So we will hopefully have such webinars in early next year. And then in terms of the future of education, to give you a bit an idea of how we would work at the OECD, of course, we have our flagship research projects, which you could learn a lot about. There's a Future of Education 2030 project, which has produced a lot of resources on curriculums for the future, on the policies that can support students acquiring such competencies. So we can point you towards those resources, but we can also develop more tailored support to the countries based on your requirements and your demands. So we can have a more in-depth conversation of your needs and develop a program of assistance with the OECD to kind of tailor the help. So as someone mentioned earlier, not a one-size-fits-all. We would not be able to give you the policies that would work in the context. We really need to do more in-depth studies of the country and tailor with you a program of assistance that could work. So we can discuss this, of course, throughout the conference. I'm available whenever you'd like, and Marco as well. And just on the analysis, further analysis of PISA data, there will be a workshop next year on the new PISA data for the PISA participating countries and mock ABEX. So we will have more capacity building in terms of going beyond the results and a very in-depth analysis in terms of the new PISA data for 2022. This is, I think, in general what I wanted to say, but I'll give it over to Marco to talk about peer-to-peer learning in Wales.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the Welsh case, because I almost lived there at one point. Basically there every 2 or 3 weeks I was there. And I think the fascinating thing is because Wales has brought all these things which we're talking about together. Much more deeper research, analyzing what are the strengths and challenges. For example, the item analysis that presented over there. They really did this kind of analysis with international assessments, but also their own data. To look, what does this mean for our curriculum? But also, what does it mean for our professional development? In design and professional development. So, professional development is, of course, for teachers in terms of content and pedagogy. What many countries do, they focus on the pedagogy or on the content, and they bring them together. So there we already go. What they also did, I think, in terms of Wales, is they look at the research evidence. Okay? You learn a lot with social human beings, so we learn from each other today. I think they built that into professional development programs. So think about also what the Swedish did really well, which I think she didn't maybe fully highlight it, Maria, but I think probably one of the most strongest cases in there of the professional development program. Yes, they focused on those areas which needed support, but there was a peer learning element in there. Everything was collaborative. And that really helped. That's what we're seeing from research evidence all over the world. Collaborative professional development is really working. I think the peer learning, which I think the Welsh, they build it through many things. In terms of peer learning around the curriculum, in terms of curriculum design, and in terms of promoting professional development around teachers. They even developed the school as a learning organization model. To really have organizational learning, peer learning, organizational learning. We were heavily involved in that. In terms of, let's say, technical assistance, helping them develop that model. Importantly, and that's one thing that came through the presentation as well, doing that with the profession, with the experts, I think throughout the system. So I think in terms of what the Welsh case did really well, I think in terms of peer learning, everything they did was with the profession. In terms of tools development, I think in strategy development, I think in terms of implementation there. I think we can present much further, but there's a few cases which I think are quite relevant. Maybe tomorrow if we're doing a pickup, we'll bring out a few of these cases and respond to this. And definitely, we're very interested in working with you and understanding what are your specific issues, because key message as well from Kirsty has to be context specific. So just copy and pasting some good policies, it doesn't work. But we do see from research evidence some elements are coming forward. So we're very keen to respond to you, I think, as a group with all of your needs individually, I think, indeed. We're taking notes. Definitely discussing maybe potentially further in terms of policy assessment. What are your interests? Really going to the deep. So we do at the OCD, let's say, 2 things in terms of our support. You know our regular programs, the PISA, the TELUS, and all these programs, and Curriculum 2030 where you can join on to. We also provide very tailored support. And it can be given in shape in terms of, let's say, an assessment of your system, in terms of the policies and areas which you want us to look into, to learn from other countries, but then very much tailored to your context, to work with you, finding some good solutions, which can be a narrow area, let's say only teacher professional development. It can also be a much broader strategic action plan. So for example, in Wales, we were asked to really support the full exercise, let's say the broader strategic development, but then supporting some specific pieces in terms of technical assistance afterwards. So very responsive to that. But then there's a need, for example, I think Lynn is working currently in the Local Women project, developing, I think, support development of an item bank. So it can be very specific technical skills. They analyze these data, for example, a report like the work that Tariq did. This is something where we can definitely respond to your needs. We have the in-house expertise, but it has to be your request. So we have to respond to your needs. That's why we're here. So very pleased to be hearing this, and let's continue the dialogue. We're basically listening here to see how we can respond to you. It's basically going to be almost list of everything, but really in a base tempo. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I see a comment.
Thank you for your presentation. Really, we benefit really discussion. Actually, I would just comment to the presentation Ali presented. I think he represents several reports. I think this type of report will benefit if it is distributed to the I think it's very. Also, if you find another type of this report from other European and with other countries, I think that would be very good to have that. Actually, in Italy, we have this report similar to what Tariq presented. I think that will become distributed to the GCC countries. I think the important thing here, how we can benefit of OCD result to benefit our country and benefit I think this type of report, we should read it and try to at least imitate type of this report and do it similar to that one. I think that will help us go deep with this result and benefit of the result of OCD or TIMS test. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا. بس استفسار بسيط اللي هي المعايير الوسطيه التقييميه للصف الرابع. عندنا تغطي اذا نحسب مستوى الكفاءه في الرياضيات الصفين الثاني والثالث. للاسف لا توجد امتحانات دوليه يعني لا توجد كيف ولا بيرس تغطي هذه المستويات. فاحنا نضطر ان نعمل اختبارات وطنيه مع القياس حقيقي لقياس مستوى الطلبه في هذا المستوى، وكذلك في البيرس فقط لا يغطي مثلا المطلوب في بعض المؤشرات اللي هي انا ممكن اقرا هنا المعايير المرجعيه للمنطقه العربيه نسبه الطلاب الصف في نهايه التعليم الاعدادي حاصلين على الاقل الحد الادنى مستوى الكفاءه القراءه. فلا يوجد يعني اختبار بيرس لا يغطي هذه المرحله. فما اعرف هل يوجد تنسيق بين الاي واليونسكو يعني في خلق امتحانات دوليه تقيس هذه المستويات لان احنا بحاجه اليها. والسؤال الثاني ممكن للاخوه في المجلس مع يعني كيف نغطيهم هذا الثلاث نقاط اللي هي احنا كتبنا لا ينطبق على السرطان، والحين عندنا خطه ان ننفذ اختبارات وطنيه في هذه المراحل السنيه بالضبط يعني لان لا توجد لا تيمز ولا بيرس يغطيها.
I think this is the last question, unless I'm mistaken. But yeah, very well noted in terms of sharing the type of reports that were included in Tariq's presentation. I think after this workshop, we can send you all a folder with all of the presentations so that you have them on hand and you can add additional resources based on what you have mentioned. So you can have them on hand. They will be in English, but I'm sure if needed, Alex can help in translation. So on SDG 4, I think Abdel Salam wanted to respond to this question.
Okay, thank you very much. بالنسبة لموضوع المؤشرات وخاصة مؤشرات المنطقة العربية والمؤشرات الوسطية اللي تم الاتفاق عليها، أساساً نحن لا نقيس في المستوى الثاني والثالث، نحن نقيس أساساً في المستوى الرابع. وعلى النتائج الرابعة تعكس أداء الطلاب في الثاني والثالث. لأنه لا يوجد اختبارات دولية، لا يوجد دراسات دولية إطلاقاً تغطي الثاني والثالث. نفس الكلام بالنسبة للصف التاسع، نتائج الصف الثامن يعني تعكس على مدخلات الصف التاسع، وبالتالي هي عبارة عن موازنة عملية. يعني وعندنا الأسبوع القادم اجتماع في الفريق الدولي المعني بالمؤشرات، واحدة من النقاط التي ستناقش هذه القضية أيضا إلى جانب المؤشرات في 4.2 الخاصة بالطفولة المبكرة و4.7 الخاصة باللي هو المواطنة وبقية اللي هو القضايا المتخصصة في موضوع اللي هو حقوق الانسان والمواطنه، لانه لا يوجد لها اي مؤشرات حقيقيه لحد الان، وبالتالي واحده من القضايا الاساسيه اللي سويت داخل الاسبوع القادم يعني. وعلى الاساس ايضا قمه التحول للتعليم التي عقدت في نيويورك قبل فتره حددت 5 مسارات العمل هي تكون الاساسيه، وبالتالي سوف تعكس عليها سوف يكون تعديل بسيط. التقرير النصفي الذي ستعمله الدول لليونسكو لابد ان تعكس كل هذه المؤشرات التي سيتم افرادها الاسبوع القادم. شكرا جزيلا.
Okay, thank you very much. Unless there are any last questions or comments, I think we can wrap up for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 10. As Marco said, we will start with a small recap of today, the key highlights. So if you also want to think about it and come back to us tomorrow with some things that stood out to you, it would be great to hear from you. And we will move to the second theme of the conference, which is about school policy. So we'll be delving deeper into the data about this. So I think, unless Abdulsalam, you want to give it a last remark? Yes, 10 o'clock tomorrow. See you all, and I will be around with more questions. Alhamdulillah.